There have been extra sailings overnight at Dover in an attempt to clear the huge backlog of travellers.
A very good morning to you. It is 6 o'clock on Sunday, the 2nd of April, and this is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Angela. And here are your top stories this morning.
Well, it's been a night of misery for some travellers as ferry operators in Dover have had to put on additional overnight sailings as they work to clear the backlog of Easter traffic.
Russia has assumed the presidency of the United Nations Security Council, despite outrage from Ukrainian officials. We'll have expert analysis and be speaking to a Ukrainian MP.
It's Autism Awareness Day. Now, how far would you go to raise awareness of the condition? Well, we'll find out from one teenager who's going the extra mile, or two, to break down some misconceptions.
And as ever, of course, you can join in any of our discussions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Now, are you taking a trip to France for Easter or trying to? Well, best of luck for you. Delays at the port of Dover have seen people waiting up to 16 hours to get onto a ferry.
I tell you, some of the pictures coming out of there are just staggering. And the situation has been described as a shambles. And the port, and they were forced last night to put on extra ferries to try and clear the backlog.
Well, the port has blamed lengthy French border processes and sheer volume. Well, let's get a breakdown of what is going on the political side of this from Lettis Bramowski from Young Voices UK. I mean, it's interesting, Lettis, isn't it? I mean, the Labour Party jumping onto this and saying, well, the government's really got to sort it out. Is it within the government's gift, do we think?
I think it's particularly unsurprising that Labour are jumping on this and Keir Starmer's making those comments. I mean, this is sort of one of those classic easy wins for them where he can, attack immediately on the government's point because, like you were just saying, this is not working. Something is really wrong here. We cannot have that every holiday season, every travel season, people are having to wait upwards of 16 hours, 20 hours for just to get through, to get out of the country. And we need to have a system that works. And so while there are some things where this could be just to do with the Dover port, I think a lot of this stands between UK and French relations at the moment. And I think that the French police are not doing their part to help this. It was only in July last year that there was another row at Dover when newly installed French police booths were left unmanned, leading again to huge traffic jams. We're currently going through a process right now, which has been delayed in Brussels, where we're trying to get this new system in, this new entry-exit system, which is run essentially off of fingerprints and facial recognition, which would get rid of that very slow process of the police and French authorities having to stamp every passport. So hopefully once we get that through, this will get better. We need the technology in place that will help this, and that's got to come from the government.
Yeah, it's not necessarily the government, though, as you say, to sort it out. I think the CEO there is called Doug Bannister, and I hope that he might be prepared to come and talk to us a bit later on in the programme this morning and tell us exactly what it is he's doing to get people moving. But it's interesting that Keir Starmer has waded into this because yesterday I saw that Mandelson, of course, the grandee of the Labour Party, actually came out and said it's time that Starmer was a bit bolder, that he's got to come up with a few more powerful brushstrokes. And it's no good just sneaking over the finishing line at the next general election. He's just got to come out with something that's a bit stronger than he's doing at the moment. Do you think that, I think Mandelson is the first person that's actually been brave enough to come out and say, Starmer, you're not quite doing the job that we expect of you yet. Is that going to make a difference to him, do you think?
I think definitely within the Labour Party, Lord Mandelson, as you're saying, he was one of the architects of New Labour. He's got a lot of influence. He's got a lot of power. And him saying that it's a big statement. He is demanding this fresh thinking and boldness. And quite frankly, I think that is what we need. There have been many issues where Starmer has been on the fence about it, whether that is over strike action, whether that is over the gender recognition bill. There are many issues which need Starmer and Labour to showcase that they can lead this country and be strong enough to define their own opinion and what that means on it. On the NHS, actually, at the same conference, he was he praised a lot Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, that NHS needs reform and that we shouldn't be defined only our measure of ambition by our spending. And I think that's so right. The NHS does need reform, and it's very healthy to hear that that also is coming from Labour now, that the issue isn't working. It's massively over budget. We have this continuous backlog. And although Labour have been ahead in the polls, a lot of people will say that that isn't due to Labour winning and Keir Starmer's great leadership, but because of the Conservative failings we've seen over the last 3 years.
Is there a danger in an intervention by Lord Mandelson, though? Because, as you say, he is sort of the man behind New Labour, and that has a tainted image, doesn't it? I mean, you know, Tony Blair is not popular within the Labour Party and not within the Parliamentary Labour Party, or a lot of it. So does that sort of intervention actually damage Keir Starmer rather than help him?
I don't think that it would damage him in any way. I mean, it's showing that there is clearly some sort of, tensions behind the scene, that perhaps people don't think Keir Starmer is doing enough for his party and he's not being bold enough, even though they are ahead, as we were just saying, more needs to be done here. But I don't think it as such is damaging him, more hopefully pushing him in the right direction to be making these bolder moves and these bigger steps. And, the general election really is just round the corner now. So he's got to be thinking about the bigger picture. We've got to have confidence that if Labour does get in, which is the way it seems to be going right now, that they will be able to run this country.
It's good to see you this morning. Thanks very much indeed. It's interesting. Leslie's saying the general election is just around the corner. I don't
18
know.
months away. But
18, well, it could be as late as 2025.
It could, but, as we all know, time in politics does get squeezed.
Well, it does. It
all
does.
runs away with us, doesn't it?
But I wonder when they'll do it. I don't know.
At the last minute, because
do you think?
I think they will go. Yes, no. Rishi Sunak is doing his best to put things right at the moment, and I think, along with Jeremy Hunt, they're not going to go to the country until they feel that they stand a fighting chance at the polls.
Yeah. Well, what are your thoughts on that? GB
and
News.
Also,
gbnews.uk. Go on.
And also, maybe let Labour put their foot in it a few more times.
Well, maybe. But of course, it's going to be interesting to see what Labour comes out with. Well, it is a political game,
isn't it? It's a political game.
But we shall see what's in the manifesto, then we can hold people to their promises, which will be interesting. It is very nearly 8 minutes past 6. Let's bring you up to date with what else is going on today.
3 British men are being held in Taliban custody in Afghanistan. They include the so-called danger tourist, Miles Routledge, who had to be rescued from Kabul by British forces less than 2 years ago. The Foreign Office says it's working very hard to secure contact with the British nationals who've been detained.
The Home Secretary will introduce new measures to tackle child sexual abuse and take on grooming gangs. Writing in the Mail on Sunday, Suella Braverman has announced those working with children will have a legal duty to report signs or suspicions of child sex abuse.
£8 million of taxpayers' money is going to be spent offering public authorities a new portrait of the King. Schools, courts, councils and police forces will be able to claim the official picture as part of the new government scheme. The Cabinet Office says it's a tradition for many institutions to display official royal portraits.
I'm torn over that.
What?
The portrait story. Because I like the idea. I think it's quite nice if these official institutions want to have a picture of the King. I think that's nice. However, £8 million at the moment could be better spent.
Yes, and it doesn't actually have to be portrait as in painted. It could be just a very nice photograph, which would cost considerably less, wouldn't it? And they'd still have their official picture of the King.
Yeah.
As everybody around the world in the Commonwealth has always had a picture of the Queen in the past.
Well, let us know what you think. I would say I like the idea, I just don't like the cost.
Yeah. Go down to Happy Snaps and get a quick pic.
One way of doing it.
Right, something a bit more serious now, and that is, and actually I am staggered by this story. I put my cards on the table before we start. Russia has assumed the presidency of the United Nations Security Council. The position, which rotates monthly between the 15 members, is largely procedural. However...
Well, Ukraine's president has expressed his outrage, previously having called for the council to be dissolved altogether, but the US said it was unable to block Russia from assuming the role.
Today, a terrorist state began to chair the UN Security Council. Russia is chairing the UN Security Council. It's hard to imagine anything that proves more the total bankruptcy of such institutions. Reform is obviously overdue to prevent a terrorist state and any other state that wants to be a terrorist from destroying the peace.
Well, with us in the studio now to break all of this down is security expert Elizabeth Braw. So my apologies, Elizabeth. Elizabeth, it seems perverse at a time when Russia has invaded Ukraine that their presidency should go to a Russian. What on earth are the UN thinking of?
The UN isn't thinking at all. This is a procedural matter, so the presidency changes on a regular basis, and now it's Russia's turn. And the problem is, nobody is in a position to change those procedures. They were set up when the United Nations, rather, was set up, and that's how the United Nations operates. And the problem is also that if other countries were to somehow kick Russia out, then of the presidency, then the next time, for example, the UK has its turn to preside over the Security Council, then Russia could say, well, now we're going to stage a coup against you. So it's a very tricky matter, and it goes back to the end of World War II, the beginning of the Cold War, when countries came together to try to form some sort of viable institution, and that's the only one we've got.
So in fact, President Zelensky's got a point, hasn't he, when he says this is just outdated now. This needs to have radical reform, because it's laughable.
It needs radical reform, but we don't have any better option on any sort of shelf for a better global organisation that can adequately represent all the countries of the world and bring them together to some sort of decision-making body. This is the best option we've got, and it's not very good. And the problem is also, if we were to try to reform the United Nations or even just the Security Council at the moment, it would be blocked by one of the current permanent members. So we are stuck with this not very good organisation.
And the last time that they had the presidency was at exactly the same point where Russia invaded Ukraine. I mean, and I read that, in fact, the Russian ambassador to the United Nations says that he is going to be very active during the 1 month that he's there. What kind of damage could he do in that time?
He could do a lot of reputational damage to the United Nations. He can't do very much in terms of actual output, because if he does something, if he suggests something really outrageous, it will be blocked by the US, the UK or France. But he can do a lot of reputational damage. And unfortunately, in the past few years in particular, the United Nations has suffered a lot of reputational damage because countries have tried various crazy schemes. We should remember, for example, that the council that is in charge of human rights voted with China, the majority voted with China on the matter of the persecution of the Uyghurs, or the repression of the Uyghurs. So all of this harms the United Nations. But on the other hand, again, this is the best institution we've got, or actually it's the only global institution we've got.
By the way, it seems a remarkable position that we say, well, there's nothing anyone can do about it because a permanent member will veto it, we have no other alternative. We just need to pull out and start. I mean, there's nothing to stop individual countries like the UK pulling out and saying, let's form something new.
So you can try that and you form something new, but you won't have the countries in the tent that you want to have in the tent, the countries that you don't agree with, because we have to have some sort of global body where all countries come together, not just the countries that behave in the manner that we like.
Well, yes, but then we have a current situation where a country that has breached the UN Charter is chair of the Council, who no action can be taken against by the UN because they will veto it. I mean, it's just totally ridiculous.
It is. The problem is that we, after the end of World War II, we somehow thought that, oh, this is the end of brutality on this scale, and now countries will have sobered up to the reality that they have to get along, they have to behave in a certain manner. And we got nothing of the kind. We had the same sort of notion after the end of the Cold War that, oh, now we're all becoming much better countries, and countries that have been authoritarian, totalitarian are becoming more like us. The West, nothing of the kind happened, or a bit of the kind happened, but not enough. And countries there are many countries that are immoral, brutal, and this is the only way in which we can somehow reduce their liberty to act, and it's not a lot of opportunities within the United Nations, but it's better than nothing.
I think there was an expectation, as you say, that everyone would behave themselves and we would not get into a position where two members of the United Nations were actually at war with each other. And I suppose the real threat here is the way in which Russia may use this as an opportunity, not only to justify the fact that they invaded Ukraine in the first place, but also to use it as a platform for a lot of misinformation.
Absolutely. And the other thing is that you can drum up a lot of support within the United Nations among countries that may want something from you. And that's what we've seen China doing. It has a number of countries that it gives loans to, and then those countries vote with China in the United Nations, which is why we get those crazy votes, for example, against condemnation of the repression and persecution of the Uyghurs. And we'll see the same thing with Russia. Countries want something from Russia, including weapons. Russia is not in a position to give very many weapons at the moment because it's using them itself, but nevertheless, it is in a position to give poorer, smaller countries something that they want, and in exchange, those countries will vote with Russia either in the Security Council, if they happen to be there at the moment, as non-permanent members, or in the General Assembly.
Okay. Fortunately, they'll only be there for a month. I suppose we should take that as the only good thing to come out of this.
They will only be president for a month, then they revert to just being a permanent member, which is a powerful position to begin with.
Yeah. OK, Elizabeth, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. If you've got a view on that, and I'm sure you have, gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Lots more to come. We're going to be taking a look at World Autism Awareness Day and the fundraising efforts of one determined 16-year-old.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Angela.
Well, still to come this morning, 7:20, we'll be talking to an expert on how to keep your teeth healthy and shining without breaking the bank over rising NHS dentist fees.
Do get in touch in all the usual ways. Email gbviews at gbnews.uk, or you can always tweet us at gbnews, and you have already been getting in touch with us, so thank you. Good to hear.
Yeah, loads of you getting in touch actually on the Dover situation, including Margaret. Morning, Margaret, wherever you are at the moment, saying we are on the ferry. After 12 hours at Dover, we are successfully on our way across the channel.
Brian says, meanwhile, we're back at Dover. Coaches full of people, all of ages, stuck in queues of up to 15 hours. Many have been stopped from going on holiday. Thanks, Brexit, he says.
Can you blame it on Brexit? I don't know that you can. But mind you, Jake says, whether you accept it or not, Brexit is cause for huge delays in Dover. Your acceptance is an irrelevance.
And Sarah just reminds us it's not just tourists who are stuck at the port of Dover, it's essential medical supplies as well. Yeah, everything being stuck there, isn't it? Look, those pictures. I'm sorry to those of you who are listening on radio who can't see this, but I can tell you there are, 6 lanes full of traffic going back miles. Those of you who may be listening to us, as I think Margaret probably was on radio, you are the ones who are stuck in this at the moment. Oh, I am so sorry for you, because it means you're not getting away for your Easter holidays. But, oh, gosh. Do you know, I said yesterday, Easter comes up every year. It's not as if we don't know it's going to happen. You'd think they would be organised and prepared for it.
Well, they're blaming the French for a lot of it, aren't they? Issues on the French side and border checks and all the rest of it. Now, whether that is actually the case, I don't know. I'm not down there. I've not been able to go and have a look.
The French are this side.
Well, they are. Yeah, they are now.
The French are this side.
But it's, you know, are they causing the problems?
Maybe not enough of them, perhaps.
Are they doing it deliberately?
Who knows?
Hate to be a conspiracy theorist, but it wouldn't surprise me. But anyway, fingers crossed if you are going via Dover. Good luck to you.
Get away soon. I really do.
Now, we like inspirational stuff, and it is Autism Awareness Day. There are 700,000 people thought to have the spectrum condition in the UK. The National Autistic Society says there's still much more to be done to raise awareness and create a more autism-friendly world.
Well, in the meantime, to raise money as well as awareness for the charity, a Birmingham teenager with autism has decided he is going to walk 15,000 steps a day.
Well, our West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson, went to meet him.
In the quiet Birmingham suburbs, one teenager is taking big steps to raise money for autism awareness. 16-year-old Alfie Ford is raising funds for the National Autistic Society throughout April by walking 15,000 steps a day, with all the money from his donation page going to the charity. Alfie, who lives with autism, says he's taking on the challenge to change the perception of the spectrum condition.
I started doing it because I realised there was a lot of misconceptions and a lot of bad things being said about autism, and not many people are truly aware of how people are with autism. A lot of people think that we don't talk, we don't interact with many people, we're not like everyone else, we just have it for attention and everything like that. And I just want to change the way people think of autistic people for good.
Last year, he completed 10,000 steps a day with his mum Marie, before this time deciding to go further by adding an extra 5,000. Marie says she couldn't be prouder of Alfie's hard work.
He's getting a lot more confidence. We're doing a raffle, so he's been emailing people asking for prizes and that. He's received loads of donations, and he just seems like he's happy to do it, considering we can't even get him to go to college because his autism and sensory issues overload. So for him to concentrate on this and do it every day, we're very proud of him.
The National Autistic Society estimates around 700,000 people in the UK have autism, each with their own unique sets of challenges, from social communication to highly focused interests and extreme anxiety. The start of Alfie's month of fundraising also comes at the end of World Autism Acceptance Week, where he's been making his final preparations, including organising a march from Birmingham City's St Andrew's Stadium.
On the 22nd of April, I'll be doing a march from Birmingham Stadium, St Andrew's Stadium to the Edgbaston Stadium and then to Birmingham New Street train station. And I'll be going to Digbeth, and then I'll be going back to St Andrew's Stadium where we'll be back by 2:40. We're hoping at half-time something good will be happening, but I can't tell you about that yet. You'll have to wait and see.
With the support of his community and local MP Sakib Bhatti, Alfie's lacing up to start pounding the pavement for a more autistic-friendly world in the future. Jack Carson, GB News, Chelmsley Wood.
Well, good on you, Alfie.
Absolutely.
Good on you.
Yeah.
I think what a remarkable young man, and making his point heard and clear and getting on and raising money. I know, power to his elbow, I say.
Yeah. Just wear nice, comfortable shoes, Alfie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good on you. Look, still to come, we're taking you through the papers today with Alan Miller and Emma Wolfe.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, The People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
.28, very good morning to you. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Angela.
We're going to take a look at today's front pages and then look at stories in just a moment. But the front pages of the Times warns of a new nightmare for NHS patients as junior doctors take to the picket lines once again.
The Observer uncovers a care home crisis with children sent hundreds of miles away.
The Mail claims that a so-called vegan mob is plotting to sabotage the Grand National.
The Sunday Express has Rishi having 6 months to sort out the boats crisis.
And the Telegraph reports that lockdown children are having to wait a year for NHS help.
The Sunday Mirror remembers Paul O'Grady with the headline, "Have a laugh at my funeral."
While the Sun exposes the married England ace who reportedly forced his lover to sign a gag order.
And this is a story you want to see. Easter bunny and sunnies, says the Daily Star Sunday, as temperatures are set to soar to 24 degrees over the bank holiday weekend. Too good to be true.
Well, yes, and you were saying it like that because you've got to work over the weekend, haven't you?
Yes, I have,
yes.
yeah.
No, we
still want it to be nice, though.
No, the rest of us will be out sunning ourselves. Don't worry about it. Right, to look through the newspapers now, we've got Emma Wolfe, a journalist and writer, and Alan Miller, who's co-founder of the Together Association. It's so good to have you both on the programme with us this morning. You've been going through the papers. And Emma, you start us off with actually a very serious story on the front page of the Times, isn't it?
Yeah.
Life-changing operations are facing cancellations as the junior doctors strike.
Yeah.
I think everybody was thinking that that was sort of coming to an end, didn't
I think many of us thought that there had been a breakthrough on pay and that we were coming to the end of NHS strikes, but obviously we've got months and months of backlog from industrial action across the services, nurses, junior doctors, paramedics, everything. So now there's another wave of strikes coming from junior doctors after the Easter weekend, which is always a sort of backlog time anyway, a 4-day strike starting on the 11th of April, which is going to cause yet more months of cancellations and delays for patients. You know, some of them, I mean, there are stories in the Sunday Times, a 13-year-old facing spinal surgery, which is just being delayed and delayed, you know, parents not knowing whether to get their children ready and prepare them for hospital, whether to start packing, whether to tell them that it's happening, whether it's not. It's a sort of day-to-day cancellation thing as well, where doctors are saying, the organisation is saying, well, don't cancel yet, let's wait and see what we can get through. So it's a really chaotic situation for patients.
What worries me is the sub-headline on this, where it says, walkout made worse by Easter shutdown. Well, don't have an Easter shutdown.
There's going to be a lot of people off over Easter, which, as I say, causes delays anyway.
So don't do it.
Don't do it.
I mean, look, I know it's tough if you work in the industry. Get it, you've got to crack on.
Got to crack on because they've already got a backlog of hundreds of thousands of people, you know, and yes, it's not all critical care, but, you know, if you're an elderly person facing a hip operation that's been repeatedly delayed and delayed, if you're living in pain, or if you're mentally preparing to go in to hospital, which is a big deal for most of us, you know, it really is very disruptive.
Yeah. And I think, Emma, you know, as well as the stories, I think, Alan, we all know people who are in that position and we all know how devastating it is for them.
Well, we do, and it is, and it's very difficult. I mean, one of the things, it should be said, I'm actually in support of people that want to improve their pay conditions. Sometimes retrieving your labour is the only thing you can do, and it does beg the question, when is the right time to do it? That is a question. I mean, one of the bigger questions is the whole of the NHS and how it's run, efficiency, time waits. We know that we've got an enormous backlog as a consequence of the lockdowns, the consequences COVID-only NHS for 2 years. And we also have a bloated management and consultancy that's very ideologically driven as well, who actually got 2 and 3 times pay rewards and, you know, during this whole period. So I think that there needs to be a taking to task of the whole organisation. It's not a deity, it's not a religious institution. We should think about efficiency and execution and delivering service. But we also need lots of new doctors, and we have an issue with that as well. So from the point of view of training and pay and all of those things, we need to really seriously grab it.
Rip it up and start again.
Do you know, I was about to say that I would love us to go back to what Anira and Bevan did back in the 1940s, start with a blank sheet of paper with the billions that they now have.
You couldn't pour more money in. It isn't the money per se,
again,
it's organisation.
Plan it again from scratch with that blank piece of paper, which is exactly what Anira and Bevan did when nobody else in the world had a National Health Service, and look at what is required, not as we did then for the 1940s, 50s and 60s, but what we actually need for the 21st century and beyond.
Can you do that? That's the
well,
thing.
Everybody tells me you can't, but I would love them to try it. I really would.
Because how do you do the handover? How do you move it from one system to another? I don't know, but I think that's what's needed. I really do. Well, I agree.
Yeah.
But
I mean, the same goes for every single public service in this country. You would say, you know,
Start
again, because look at the mess that we've got ourselves into.
Alan, let's have a look at the Mail on Sunday, should we? What they're calling a vegan mob. I know a few vegans. They're not the mob types, really, but anyway, a vegan mob plots to sabotage the Grand National. Are you a vegan?
Semi-vegan, yeah.
So semi-vegan?
Yeah, I mean, very, very strict vegetarian.
Oh, well, I'm a strict vegetarian.
Oh, well, there, we got a mob down this end.
But I do like a bit of cheese. So there you go.
And would you only have
living
veggies?
dangerously.
Oh, yeah.
Right, well, this story...
It's thrown you off, hasn't it?
Well, it's interesting that we're... like, you know,
yes,
people make different choices, you know. It's very popular, actually, some of these things. But what's interesting about this is a number of things that over 100 activists planning to disrupt the Grand National with similar style to what we've seen recently, things gluing their hands together, actually stopping the whole race, which has hundreds of millions of viewers, has around the world, is a very popular event across Britain. and they have a signal group and others. But Jim, there was this Jim that contacted the Daily Mail and said, look, we've got this great news. It's a real surprise. We're going to be doing this, and that's how.
It's not a surprise anymore, then, is
right,
it?
indeed. And he thought it was going to be, and because I think one of the interesting things about that is that much of the media and certainly much of the establishment have been quite supportive about some of these things, even if they've said, well, we don't really like your specific things that you've done.
That's a good story.
There's been a kind of reticence to implement the measures to stop them. So there's now a discussion about new laws that we're having to try and stop protests, you know, which I think is very problematic. But actually stopping people from doing things, we've got the laws that currently exist. What's interesting about this is that there's a very clear recognition that they think they have the moral high ground to stop something that is very enjoyable by many people on the basis of these harms. And it's been foiled. It's been foiled as a consequence of this. But I do think it speaks to this sense that we've got a situation in Britain where, you know, and I'm a big supporter of protest, legal, free protest, to be able to do that. And I don't like the extra legislation that's coming in. I challenge it. But this idea that you can basically just not try and convince and win people with hearts and minds, not trying to explain the merits or the virtues of your arguments and win them over democratically, but just go and spoil things, go and, like,
Hold on a minute.
things.
Hold on a minute. And look, I'm not saying I support this, because I actually wouldn't support them doing this. However, say you're a fan of protests and being able to protest, the right to protest. That doesn't win over hearts and minds. It's standing outside with a few placards and things. No, it doesn't convince anybody of anything. It's just having your voice heard.
Well, I think that, you know, like everything, a protest is part of an overall view. So at the Together Declaration, for instance, what we do is we encourage people to write and call and visit their MPs and their local councillors. We address the Cabinet and Downing Street. We do letter-writing campaigns. We have rallies. We go on marches and we do protests. As a 360 approach, we speak to the press. We do a number of different things. That's part of the democratic process of engaging and speaking to the public and winning them over, trying to convince them of arguments they may not agree with, which is why you need free expression as well as the freedom to protest. So I think it's really important to have freedom to protest, but this, where you have law breaking, which is purposely just to disrupt things, whether it's stopping people going to work or enjoying sport, without trying to convince them, you see, they think they've got the moral high ground. They think this has just got to be done now because we've got to stop all farming and all use of animals in any way. And they're not trying to actually convince people of the virtue of their argument. And that is really, I think, a really big problem.
Their argument is, of course, they say that it's inhumane to ask animals to jump over those very big fences and
a number of horses die every year, don't they?
Well, yes, they do, yes.
And in the wild, lots of things die all the time and we get killed and everything. So I think sometimes there's an anthropomorphism. We sort of take the view of what we think about humans and impose them on animals and think, do we, you know, treat them in the same way? And I think that that's a big discussion that we could all have about what we think about that. But again, is it we're going to do it in a democratic way which is engaging, or are we going to continue to allow and see people who think they can just destroy property and disrupt things, not trying to win people over? And actually, the majority of people in Britain don't agree with them, right? And that would be the thing, that would be our starting point for me if I had their view. How do I go and convince them rather than do things like this?
What do you reckon?
Yeah, it's a really difficult one because, you know, like you, I'm a strict vegetarian, but then people say to us, well, what would happen to all these farm animals? What would happen to all the cows and the geese and all the pigs and everything if we didn't farm them and eat them? And, you know, so you do find yourself kind of coming up against these arguments where you don't really have an answer. I do worry about the Grand National. I do think that, you know, the horses are put under a lot of pressure, unnatural. It's not like running in the field or, you know, yes, they would die anyway.
But they do like jumping.
They like jumping, OK. I don't want to see them hurt. I don't want to see them...
Nobody does.
...you know, put down or anything like that. No, none of us do. So I can see their point, but like Extinction Rebellion, absolutely I can see their point about the planet, but it's the way you go about it, and I think that Alan makes a really good point about that.
I just don't see why people can't be... I've been a very strict vegetarian for 45 years nearly, right? But I'm not against me eating
Neither am
meat.
I, for other people.
for other people.
I can be open-minded if they want to.
This is my decision.
Yeah.
This is what I do. But I'm not. If you want.
But we're not
meat,
militant
eat meat.
about it.
But I think even people who eat meat want to know that the meat has been raised humanely.
Oh, yeah, but that's
and
a good
that cruelty is not involved in it. And I think
I think there's a huge amount of guilt around eating meat. Every single meat eater or regular eater that I know, when you say you're a vegetarian, they say, I barely eat any meat at all. I only eat white chicken. I only have a bit of fish. I don't care. I'm genuinely not lecturing you. But they always say that.
Yeah,
It's
they
just
do.
funny.
Don't be guilty about if you want to eat meat. Don't feel guilty about it. Enjoy it. Because I'm from a farming background as well, so it's like you don't want to do anything against the farmers. That's for sure.
No.
Emma. This is worrying. Isn't
Emma,
it?
you're on the front page of the Observer with.
I seem to have all the sad stories this morning.
Do.
Yeah, this is an Observer investigation that's found that many foster children and children that have been going into care are being sent hundreds of miles from their hometown, from where they were. In order to be put into care because there simply isn't the provision. So children being sent up to 250 miles from London, so London children. And of course what this means is that they don't have... OK, they're being removed from their families for whatever reason because they need to be, but they are then removed from their schools, from their friends, from their local areas, from the places, clubs and activities that are key to their own kind of social lives and survival, especially at such a kind of vulnerable time. Children are being sent as far as Perth, Glasgow, Leeds, Carlisle, who come from London and almost ending up in places that they literally know no one. So
no wonder they.
Really.
There is a problem with some foster children becoming disruptive and things, isn't there?
But also being vulnerable and being exploited
but
when
no
they.
wonder.
Yeah.
With all of it.
Exactly, and the upheaval for them, emotionally and socially.
I don't know why do we not, Alan, have a better care system? Why do we not have a system that is looking after these? I mean, these are children who need absolute support.
Absolutely. I mean, the most vulnerable sections in society, and they are then placed in a dangerous situation, and we've seen the issues with grooming gangs and things like that, and a lot of people have not really wanted to address those things, but really problematic. I do think that it's slightly ironic that the Observer and the Guardian run this piece after having had 3 years where we've seen real big impositions, and one of those was the vaccine mandate, which was imposed, that the care workers across all parts of social care had to have or leave, and we lost over 40,000 of them. So the lack of staff, over 165,000 in social care and beyond that, partly is contributed to as a consequence of that. Now, it didn't happen for the rest of the NHS because many people challenged it and the government did a U-turn. But again, like with considering the implications of things, we have to think about staffing and resource. But these measures, we've still got over 40,000 people who worked at the front line, who've had a lot of experience that were just lost as a consequence.
Can't they go back now?
Well, I think partially. Firstly, some of them have tried to go back, and in some interviews, because they were lost as a consequence of that, they found problems. We've got a campaign actually says that there should be apology to them, but also reinstate and compensate them. We do know that care workers are not paid particularly good money. There is a discussion about how that could get resolved as well. I think this is part of a discussion about care and the NHS across society. And there are some models. You said, how could it be done differently in Bevan and everything? In Europe, there are some models where you have a fusion of different things, but that's about having a public debate and making sure we're at the heart of that, about what we need and what we think
Once again, it's the vulnerable, the youngest and the oldest in our society that are just being shortchanged.
Yeah.
If you work in care in early years or in geriatric care, palliative care, caring in a care home for elderly people, or if you work with vulnerable young people, you're absolutely on the scrap heap. You're not valued by this country, and I do not understand why we don't pay those workers. It's the hardest work, looking after babies and looking after elderly people, dying people, vulnerable children. These are the people that we need to be paying well to do a really important job.
I think the fact that we don't pay carers enough for whoever they're looking after, and particularly the vast army of nearly 5 million properly unpaid carers. I think it's a national disgrace. But it's interesting because you pick up a story on the front page of the Telegraph, again involving children and again involving a lack of service for them.
Indeed. And so what we've seen is that the impacts of on children in particular of lockdown in the last period has meant that everything from social distancing to not being in education, the most vulnerable of them in terms of speech therapy, development psychologically, has been limited and held back and has had big consequences. And some of them have been waiting over a year to get service within the NHS, which... frankly, a lot of the different societies, paediatrics and others have all commented on it, but this is a real travesty that not only that during the period of lockdowns, which were very egregious and were very unprecedented, and many argued against them at the time, but that our youngest generation have been so impacted and harmed by that. So this is a concern. They've been deprioritised by the NHS, following on from what we've just said, really. These are, we have a debt both to the oldest in society and to the youngest, to give a lead and show them and treat them and actually provide a foundation for them in their early years. And this is doing the opposite.
What do you think, Emma? I mean, there are inevitably going to be consequences from what we went through.
Yeah. And having a couple of years not in school, not surrounded by your peers, by your just doing normal social life. I mean, we've covered on this show in recent weeks, the suicide of young people who are just simply terrified of the world from what they went through. It's absolutely devastating. I'm worried about the impact. I've got a 2-year-old. I'm worried about the impact on babies, lockdown babies that were never surrounded by other babies. I mean, most of them seem to have recovered, but it's not a normal way to spend the first few years of your life, to be in lockdown, in isolation, and or surrounded by people in masks.
Yeah, what's the alternative?
Well, we had to go through what we went through, but we're only now finding out the truth of what the decisions were behind that. I'm trying to be polite here and not to get too angry at this time in the morning.
Yes,
Emma,
no, don't get angry.
Don't get angry.
I won't. Sunshine. Look, we've got sunshine and bunnies.
Yes. Before we get to the sunshine and the bunnies, Emma, The Crown are apparently filming the Kate and William love story.
Yeah, this is a cheery story, although I'm not watching The Crown. But anyway, the Netflix drama, they're bringing the love story, they're bringing the royal story into the 21st century, which is going to be interesting, isn't it? They're sort of filming at the moment, I think, between the 1990s and the early 2000s. So they've been filming in St Andrews, and they've got lovely photographs of a sort of rainy film set. This is the love story of Wills and Kate, and they apparently first locked eyes while jogging.
Oh, yes.
Doesn't surprise me, actually, the two of them.
Says who?
And they've got scenes of Kate waitressing in an Italian restaurant, which apparently she really did. So I think maybe I'll tune in for this instalment. Well, I want to see a bit of love story. I want to see where
She's a romantic.
How it all happened. A 19-year-old actress looking absolutely gorgeous in the rain, of course.
I tell you what, this fella, whoever, I don't know who he is. But
I don't know who either of them are.
Up
and coming.
What do you want me on? 9. Look at that. This fella, and it's not that he necessarily looks exactly like William, but just the way he's holding his mouth, his teeth, all that. It's just there's something.
There's something about. Yeah.
There is something about it. I wonder if is he a good actor or is he just a lucky
I don't know anything about him. I think it's lovely that
Ed McVeigh is called.
Two up-and-coming, getting the chance. I think The Crown has been quite good with that. They've had quite a few people that aren't big names that have sort of, made their name on The Crown.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, interesting.
And nice to have a sort of happy royal love story rather than the sort of slightly difficult one from California, isn't it?
Now, you alluded to it, but Alan has actually got the front page. The temperature to reach 24 degrees over the bank holiday weekend.
I don't know if I believe it.
It's exciting. It's good. It's what everyone's been waiting for. We've
really
had a myriad of bad weather, which has had consequences, of course, we know. There's been flooding and there's been some real problems. Some people have missed flights. They've been held up. I mean, I do think we have an issue with some of our services and logistics. If you go to some places like New York and elsewhere, they'll have thick snow and they can clear it all and everything. And sometimes we have a little bit in our infrastructure and everything shuts down. We do need to address that. But
a little bit.
It's great news.
Our transport system completely broken.
Yes, indeed. But it is really good news because both anyone who wants to be out with a family or gardening or doing other things. I'm a cold water swimmer, so I actually quite like the cold. But this is going to be good news for everyone.
Yeah, but your Easter eggs are going to melt.
Put them in the fridge. I don't care about that. Let's have some hot weather. Come on, this country's ready. We've had so much rain. It's been a long old March. It was a very long January. It's been a long winter. I think this country is so ready for some sunshine.
Well, it is. I tell you what, if nothing else, it will lift our spirits as a nation, I think.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mentally,
I'm fed up of driving home in the rain.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just so depressing.
And also, isn't it wonderful when people are going away and you think, well, we don't need to go away, really?
We can stay at home and enjoy the sunshine.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, we've enjoyed your newspaper reviews. Thank you very much indeed, and we'll be seeing you again at least twice in the programme before we have to say good morning to you. Now, a 13-year-old boy who has been camping out in his back garden for 3 years is finally coming in from the cold. Max Woosey, known as the boy in the tent, began raising he just wanted to raise £100 for charity when he started.
Well, he did, but 3 years later, and best part of £750,000 later, he's camped his way into the Guinness Book of World Records.
And our South West of England reporter, Jeff Moody, has been along to meet him.
At the height of the first lockdown, when everyone was going inside, 10-year-old Max Woosey went out into the garden, and he's been there ever since.
It was really strange at first. I think the first 6 months I probably struggled, just knowing that he was out there, and, you know, in that time we had a couple of storms with thunder and lightning, so that was very strange. And now it's just a way of life.
His goal was to raise £100 for the North Devon Hospice. Instead, he's raised £700,000 and counting.
My favourite's been camping out at the rugby stadium, so Sandy Park, so the Exeter Chiefs Stadium, and Twickenham, so the England Rugby Stadium. But you know what? I think this is going to be it. From tomorrow, I reckon this is going to be my favourite moment.
Yeah.
It's his last night under canvas, and to celebrate, Broomhill Estate near Barnstable has opened its grounds for the mother of all camping festivals. Up to 500 people sharing Max's last night.
I'm so happy with the way the day's turning out. We've got tons of people. It's a hive of activity, music, a hog roast, food trucks, a silent disco in the woods, a party bus with 10 DJs. It's just a lot going on, culminating in fireworks and a good night's sleep for Max and those brave enough to camp out with him.
Brave indeed. It poured down, but Max is used to that.
The night I remember was Storm Beatrice. I had to sleep out because we were a bit worried about the tent blowing away and the storm. We have the house policy is named Storm. I have to sleep out with him. I didn't get a wink of sleep all night because it was so noisy. He snored throughout the night. That's my recollection of snoring in the tent.
He's just upset because I said he snored, so he's making things up now.
After 3 years, Max is calling it a day, with a mixture of emotions all round.
I think that's going to be the most natural thing, actually, trying to get back into what used to be normal, from being able to sleep inside and do your normal routine again.
Yeah, it's going to be a huge adjustment. Because if you think he's 13, so, you know, 3 years is almost a quarter of his life. So that's a big chunk of time that's just been our norm.
Well, Max says he's got lots more adventures planned and lots more money to raise. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Oh, you cynic, Angela.
What?
You cynic.
Why?
Because you just said we didn't hear much from him.
Well, we didn't. I'd quite like... I'm sure his parents are very interesting. But I wanted to hear more from the boy himself.
Yeah, but he's 13 years old. He don't have a lot to say at that age.
Yes, he does. He's been interviewed everywhere, and his voice has changed.
It was all right. It was all right. Raised a bit of money.
But I did actually hear him giving an interview where he was saying that because he's been sleeping out in the garden for so long, that his mum has now prepared the bedroom for him to go back into. And unfortunately, because he's been sleeping out for so long, he can't sleep in the bed. He's going to have to sleep on the floor until he gets used to it, and then he'll go back into the bed. No, well, I take my hat. I wanted to hear from him.
I'll tell you what, though. So there is, I can't remember which company it is, but I did see the other day that some fancy mattress company has given him a brand new mattress.
And so they should.
Like a really fancy one.
Why would they not?
He'll never want to get out of it.
We've had 2 stories today already, haven't we, of young people doing things.
Great things.
Ah, fantastic. I love that.
It is a nice thing to see. Look, I was saying earlier on, a portrait is being made available to official institutions, schools, council offices, things. It's got a cut of the King, portrait of the King. Which I think is a good thing. I like it, but it's going to cost us £8 million. Paul, morning Paul, says, can someone please tell me why it costs £8 million for a portrait of the King? Well, I guess it's just how many copies they'll have to make of it, which will be a lot.
But you see, the use of the word portrait I find interesting, because I always associate that with a painting of some sort. But I suspect that they will actually be photographs. But Helen says, I'm outraged at the money being spent on this. A member of my family is waiting on cancer treatment, cancelled twice because of staffing problems. If Charles has got a black bone, he'll say, stop it. It is sickening, and I was a monarchist. disgusted at the soap opera called The Royal Family. Get rid of them.
Oh no. No, Helen, no.
Speak your mind, Helen.
And talking of getting away and things, we might not need to if the weather gets so good next weekend. On the Dover crisis, Martin says, I'm surprised to see all these people going away. I thought there was a cost of living crisis, but there can't be. But Laura says there have always been queues going to France for bank holidays. The French are useless at organisation. They enjoy upsetting Brits and cutting their noses off to spite their face.
Oh, désolé. Right, more to come on the show. And we'll be seeing you a bit later on when we'll be talking about passengers who, again, at Dover, have been forced to wait 14 hours to board their ferry to France. More on that in a bit. But first, let's see how the weather really is shaping up.
Hello there, very good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Sunday is looking like the better half of the weekend for many of us, and that is partly thanks to high pressure that has built its way in for the day, helping to settle things down for a lot of us. We do just, though, have a little squeeze in the isobars across the far southeast of England, and that's just bringing a bit more of a breeze throughout today. So certainly across parts of East Anglia down into Kent as well. It will feel quite chilly in there, but the cloud is breaking up across central eastern areas of England and into the Scottish borders as well to provide a good number of sunny intervals as we head throughout the afternoon. Cloud just lingering a bit more across southwest England, Wales, up into Northern Ireland and areas of Scotland as well. We can't rule out the odd spot of rain or drizzle here, but it should stay largely dry. Western areas also seeing some of the highest temperatures throughout the day, perhaps 13 degrees across the southern areas, just that bit cooler again where you are on those eastern coastal sites. The cloud in the west will continue to break up as we move throughout this evening, and a lot of us will hold on to some clear intervals throughout the night. That will allow temperatures to drop away, and certainly we could be dropping down to frost levels across many rural areas of England and Wales, even down to -1, -2s in a few towns and cities as well. Just holding up a bit more across the far northwest where we've got a bit more cloud in place, and the breeze will also strengthen here across Northern Ireland, northwest Scotland as we head into Monday. The sunshine hazier across the northwest, but for many other areas it's going to be another day of sparkling sunshine and a really nice start to the new week and the Easter holidays if you are heading out for that. Temperatures around where they should be for the time of year, highs generally around 10 to 13 degrees Celsius. High pressure is looking to stay in charge as we head throughout the new working week, but fronts do want to push their way in, particularly to northwestern areas as we head towards the middle part of the week. So Northern Ireland and Scotland, just watch out for a bit of rain as we head towards Wednesday.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Gloria Di Piero, Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. We've got 3 brilliant interviews for you this Sunday. We've got the first woman to chair the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. It's the Conservative MP, Alicia Cairns.
So the reality is we are under attack from authoritarian states on every single day.
Also, the Conservative MP who's leaving at the next election, Charles Walker.
But we do need, I don't think we attract the really big thinkers we attracted in the past.
And the leader of Britain's biggest trade union, Christina McAnee.
Nobody wants the business that their members are in to fail. You want it to succeed.
All that and more. Gloria Meets, Sunday, 6 p.m.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain.
Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Extra sailings have been put on overnight at Dover in an attempt to clear the huge backlog of travellers.
Good morning to you. It's 7 o'clock on Sunday, the 2nd of April. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Angela. These are your top stories.
It's been a night of misery for some travellers as ferry operators in Dover have put on additional overnight sailings as they work to clear the backlog of Easter traffic.
Home planning applications in England have fallen to the lowest level in 16 years. The figure from the Department for Levelling Up comes as rough sleeping is on the rise for the first time in 5 years.
And it's the Olivier Awards tonight. Paul Mescal, Jodie Cromer and David Tennant are just some of the big names that are up for top theatre going.
As ever, we'd love to hear from you. You know how to get in touch to join in the discussion. Just send us an email, gbviews@gbnews.uk.
And we love hearing from you.
Now, ferry operators have laid on additional sailings overnight from Dover as they work through a backlog of Easter traffic.
Strong winds, a large volume of coaches and slower processing times at border control have all been cited as causes.
So if you want to find out what's going on right now, who better to ask than travel guru Simon Calder. Simon, good morning to you. What is going on with all of this? I mean, we knew it was going to be very, very busy. We didn't expect it to be as bad as it was.
Good morning, Angela. Good morning, Stephen. Nice to see you. And I've been hearing from travellers overnight. It is absolutely miserable, I'm afraid, for thousands and thousands of people. I've just got the latest from P&O Ferries, one of the 3 ferry operators at Dover. They say the waiting time is now about 5 or 6 hours. But that is the time, I understand, you are likely to be waiting on a coach at the cruise terminal, which is a couple of miles away, effectively along the shore from the actual port where you want to be to get on the ferry. That's being used as a kind of holding area. Then you go through, you finally get processed, and that is absolutely the key hold up. And then you will be put on a ferry. So I've just heard from one parent whose son turned up at noon yesterday. They finally got on the 4:40 sailing this morning. Absolutely miserable. Now, as you say, there's all sorts of reasons for this, including bad weather, which has delayed ferries. But actually, this isn't affecting trucks. It's not affecting cars. It's only affecting coaches. The chief executive of the Port of Dover, Doug Bannister, yesterday said that effectively they'd been taken by surprise by the number of coaches, which was 15% higher than they had planned for. And he implied that ferry companies have been selling more coach spaces than they really had available. But the big problem with coaches is that Well, as you will know, after Brexit, we asked for tougher checks. So when you turn up at Dover, previously you just sort of waved the passport out of the window and that would be fine. Now we asked to be treated as third country nationals. So an officer is supposed to go through the passport, checking all your stamps. They then need to stamp the passport themselves, and that takes much, much longer than it did previously. Multiply that by 50 or 60 people on board a coach and you get delays. And there is nothing in the short term that is going to change that, I'm afraid.
You say nothing in the short term, but how about the long term then, Simon? I mean, because we've had several of our viewers and listeners getting in touch with us today, basically saying it's the French being awkward because they can be. I mean, is it as simple as that? Is it just that this side of the border, they are not putting on enough people to look at the passports?
No, there is simply not enough room, Angela. As I've been talking to the Port of Dover, they are now, we had problems last summer when the French were late showing up. We've got juxtaposed border controls. That means, of course, that the passports are checked on the French side of the frontier, which is in Kent. We asked after Brexit, to the democratic vote to leave the European Union, we said we want an EU hard border in Kent. In fact, we got two. We got one at Dover and another one along the coast at Folkestone. So that was something that we asked for. We then said we want to be treated as third country nationals with all the stamping that goes with it. And anybody who knows Dover, and we've seen some of the pictures there, will know it's very, very constrained. It's beneath the White Cliffs of Dover. It was never built on the basis that we would need to have these rigorous checks. And I'm afraid things are only going to get worse because coming along, possibly by the end of the year, probably actually 2024, is again something else we know about because we were involved in developing it, the entry-exit system for the EU. So everyone in those cars, on those coaches, is going to have to be fingerprinted and have a facial biometric taken. So the longer term solution is simply going to be to do exactly what they've done at London St Pancras International Rail Station, Eurostar trains. They have cut the capacity. So there are simply hundreds of empty seats leaving on every train in the morning from London St Pancras because there is not physically space to process the passengers. And I think we will see something similar at Dover. We will see either mandatory controls on the number of coaches and in summer on the number of cars, or it will be a kind of informal thing that will be regulated by the port. But it's a grim old situation and just awful for those people caught up in it, desperate to get away on a school trip, university jaunt or whatever it is, and finding that instead they're spending countless hours in a coach just parked up.
If this is a coach problem, why is it then, from the pictures we've had yesterday, that it's cars we're seeing? I mean, we are seeing coaches and lorries obviously lined up, but we're seeing hundreds and hundreds of cars as well.
Well, I can only go on what the port and what the ferry operators are telling me. You always get sort of peak times. We've seen that picture of the trucks effectively parked up or in a very slow queue along the A20 from Folkestone to Dover, and that's a sort of frequent sign. That doesn't signify serious trouble. The flow of families in cars going abroad has been fairly straightforward. I mean, you can look at a scene like that and it looks pretty gridlocked, but in fact it's flowing, and I would imagine that the queue time is maybe 45 minutes, maybe an hour. It is the coaches where you've got to, because we requested it, you've got to have a French frontier official getting onto the coach, looking at all the passports and stamping them. That is where the hold-up is. At least that's the reports that I'm getting from the port, from the ferry operators this morning.
You say it is grim, Simon. Well, grim now, grim in the future. But if we know it's going to be grim, it does beg the question, if that's going to happen, what with fingerprinting and the facial recognition in, 18 months' time, surely that gives Dover and Kent in general 18 months to do something about making the area for coaches that much bigger. Plan ahead. Why can't we do that?
there isn't space. Look, I've been talking about this with the operators, in particular the Port of Dover, for years, literally, because they know this is coming down the line. They are saying, what are we going to do? You can imagine a coachload of kids, all got to be fingerprinted. It's going to be very, very tricky. So the whole of the ferry sector is waiting for government action. But I think in the short term, it's going to be miserable. In the slightly longer term, we're going to see fewer coaches allowed on ferries. That will obviously push up the costs for, as it inevitably does when you cut the amount of capacity, and it will also mean some people will be flying rather than taking the ferry. But it's a problem that was absolutely apparent from the year 2016, because we were involved in developing the entry-exit system. We were the ones who voted democratically to leave the European Union, and these are some of the many consequences of that decision. I wish I could be the bearer of better tidings, but at the moment, it's not looking great.
Simon, as always, good to see you.
Thanks very much indeed. I tell you what it does do. It opens up an opportunity for other ports on the coast, doesn't it? To actually have the opportunity of taking lots and lots of coaches and taking people across the channel. Just move them out of Dover and put them somewhere where there is room.
Well,
or am I just being too simple about that?
Well, yeah, but I think sometimes the simple solutions are the best, aren't they? I mean, if there's not enough room at Dover, and say, Simon says, if you've been there, you know... I know, it's true, though. If Simon says, you do it. But there isn't a lot of room down there, just the infrastructure of it. So, no, ship them somewhere else.
Yeah, move them further down the coast, yes.
Right, where, how, I don't know, but it's got to be something we need to look at.
Business opportunity there for someone. Yeah. Now, this week saw the UK announcing that its largest trade deal since Brexit has happened.
Yes, the CPTPP.
Oh, well done you.
I've been practising. But in light of Britain joining that Trans-Pacific Partnership, the former Prime Minister Liz Truss is urging that China should be denied access.
She described the bloc as a vital economic bulwark against China, and she wants other free trading nations to join in future. Well, joining us now for more on this is the former speechwriter to Liz Truss, Asa Bennett. Asa, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. Now, she says it is essential that they don't join, but how do the rest of the group feel about this? There are 11 of them, and let's face it, China is a massive, massive market. What are her fears?
So I think it's that there'll be a lot of sympathy among the rest of the members of CPTPP, because you're talking about countries like Australia, which has really been sort of battered by tariffs and a bit of a trade spat with China. You're talking about countries like Japan, which is very much on China's doorstep and can see what happens when you have this massive authoritarian state able to sort of play fast and loose with the rules of international free trade. And the thing is, yeah, there'll be a lot of agreement, and so in some ways it's going to be an easy case to put. But of course, fundamentally, I think the reason that Liz made this point is because CPTPP is the club that everyone wants to be part of. It's the one that Trump's US pulled out of, yes, but then there's the hope, the belief that one day the US will think again under Biden or future presidents, and of course China's then running in there hoping it's put a formal application in that it could start to help dictate the rules of this club. And that's why Liz and others are hoping that they could then scupper this, because once you get a seat at the table, you could help decide and help shape this club. Because fundamentally, we have to remember, it's one of the reasons also why it's good the UK is on its way in, is because we're at the head of the queue and many others will be behind us knocking on the door wanting to come in.
I mean, it's interesting, though, isn't it? The idea that we manage countries by keeping them out of things rather than bringing them in and perhaps trying to reform them from that perspective.
Well, I think there's two things there. First, that that there are very clear rules that TPP has. Effectively, it's all the tenets of free trade and free market economics that, sort of fair competition and all the rest. China does not really follow many of those things. It subsidizes many of its big companies, plowing so much money into them so that they can seem much better than many private sector dynamic entrepreneurs can manage. And also, in an international sense, I think for decades we've tried and hoped to reform China by dealing with them more, trading with them more, hoping to encourage them towards democracy. And we've seen the results in the same way we have with Russia.
Is one of the reasons for us joining was because apparently it opens up these parts of the world to us economically. But there's been some controversy about whether or not it's actually going to make that much difference to us in the great scheme of things, because we aren't going to get too much money out of it. But really, the long-term benefit of this is the political advantage that it's going to give us. I mean, how do you see that?
So I think there's both advantages in economics and geopolitics. In terms of economics, I mean, I've seen the stats. I've worked with the officials who produced those stats before at the Department for Trade. The numbers are really, really very limited and very gloomsterish, deliberately, because they don't understand and don't take account for so much that's important in trade, so much about digital services, the parts of industry where the money will lie. Instead, it just assumes that if the world doesn't change at all over the coming decades, what will the money be if we join tomorrow? And no wonder then it's a bit lowballed, because you're not taking account of the fact that this is the place where most of global business will be moving over the coming decades. And so you want to be at the heart of the action. If I had to come up with a slogan, it's basically CPTPP is the place to be. I mean, knowing there's a slight rhyme there. And otherwise, into the geopolitics, as we've been discussing, it's the ability to try and really band together with lots of free market economies. And crucially, like, if you imagine the EU, what it used to be as a big trading club, it's effectively that, but without the strings attached. You don't have to pay membership fees. You don't have to listen to, foreign courts, and ultimately you're still a sovereign nation and able to trade freely and happily with your friends and allies.
OK, let's move on to something a little bit different, Asa, if we can. Sticking with the Conservative Party, though, there are some Conservative MPs, because we're all gearing up for a general election, whenever it might be, some Conservative MPs with pretty slim majorities who are unhappy that some of their colleagues are trying to sort of seat hop, if you like. There are some boundary changes and things going on, but these MPs trying to move perhaps to what is a safer seat for them, and this is causing some consternation. I've got to say, it doesn't really surprise me. They're going to want to try and go somewhere where they're guaranteed to win, aren't they?
Of course. I mean, natural instinct for MPs, particularly when they can see how the maps are being withdrawn of their constituencies, they will know if there are, for example, very Labour voting wards that are suddenly being thrust into their new patch. And in particular, if they think that they're just on, death's door politically, they may want to try and sort of do what's been called a chicken run. Of course, for the moment, what you're seeing is various MPs deciding either do they just want to bow out for good, or that they are saying that they have been re-adopted by their association, and they're talking lots of warm words about how they look forward to, how they love their members very dearly. But I think in a few months, once they realise and once they see if the polls have shifted yet, if the 15-point lead Labour currently enjoys over the Tories has gone or is even stronger, then they're going to be deciding whether they ditch or whether they stick or twist.
Stick or twist, that's a good way of putting it.
Isn't it? Yes. Yeah, and clearly a lot of them do just want to get out. Asa, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I don't blame them, in a way. I mean, I know we can all be very cynical about it, but when it's your job, if you can go somewhere where you think, well, actually, I'm guaranteed to keep my job, you'd do it, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you see, I'm old-fashioned enough to remember the days when people were MPs for the area in which they lived, where their families had lived, where they worked, where they knew everybody, because they felt very strongly about that part of the world and therefore were prepared to stand up in the House of Commons and fight on behalf of it. But we
it's
have
changed now.
It's changed, and we have career politicians who actually just want to go into nice, safe seats. They don't necessarily live there. They will do their surgeries there on a Friday, and they will do the job. But they have no real emotional connection to the place. They are career politicians, so they'll move on to someone who will give them a safe seat. Yeah. But I rather liked all those MPs who really had a proper link to the area, because they were the ones who really fought for their constituents. But then, I'm old-fashioned, you see.
Yeah, well,
I'm older than you.
Things have changed, only marginally.
Well, no, but I still think that's the... Do you know what? Actually, having said it out loud, I actually think that is the best way to be an MP.
But you see, that would then rely on... our whole system is changing, not necessarily for the better, I have to say, but that then relies on a good local MP, and you vote for the MP and not the party.
Yeah.
But that isn't how it works now, is it? People go and say, I'm voting Tory or I'm voting Labour, sort of almost regardless of who the candidate is. And that's where you get a problem. People are voting for the PM, in effect, rather than their local member.
We aren't going to change the political system, Stephen. We can sit here and jaw about it all day. Instead, let's have a look at new data that comes from the Levelling Up Department, which shows that home planning applications in England have fallen to the lowest level in 16 years.
Yeah, in 2022, local authorities had fewer requests to build new buildings since before 2006. Now, this comes as rough sleeping is on the rise for the first time in 5 years.
Now, experts say that the lack of new applications means that the housing shortfall is just going to get worse over the coming years. Property expert Christina Castellina joins us now. A very good morning to you, Christina. I tell you what struck me about this story, and we can talk about, what's happened to planning in a moment. But this idea that rough sleeping is on the increase, does that mean we are building less and less houses, not just in the private sector, but in the social sector as well, and we are going to have a situation where more and more people are simply going to be made homeless, because there are more people than there are homes?
Absolutely. This is really, really sad news. I think more than ever, we need to be building. And, in terms of the homeless situation, it's really sad, and I think there's so many multiple different reasons as to why this is happening and why we're not seeing these properties being built. I think the first one, which is quite obvious, is quite clearly the cost of materials has shot up. Certainly after COVID, we saw that massive rise in materials. Labour costs have gone up, and we're in this tricky situation, which I really see this myself. I live up north. I live in Liverpool. I invest the majority on the Fylde coast, which is Blackpool and that whole strip. Now, for me, the issue that I have is it would cost me more in materials and labour than actually what the property would be worth once I've purchased it and I've gone through that timely, lengthy, and quite honestly frustrating planning application. It's so lengthy, it's so timely, and it's still so unknown for so many people that I think actually if we went out to people that in the last 2 years they've put in a planning application and we said, right, fill in this questionnaire, tell me quite honestly, was that a positive experience? Was it negative? Did it come in on time? Unfortunately, I think that the majority of people would say, that was horrendous. I don't ever want to do that again. So we're losing people straight off the bat because people come into this thinking, I'm going to make a difference. I want to build properties. And then you're just up against obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. So there's so many people that come away from planning with scar wounds that say, I just don't want to do that again because, a lot of the time as well, they've spent so much time and so much money, they think, I can't do this again.
Yeah, but there's a big problem here, Christina, isn't there? Because it's one thing to say the planning process is a frustrated one and we need to streamline it, make it easier, make it more effective. But that then doesn't remove the first problem you raised, that actually the materials are too big to make this a viable concern, that even if planning was straightforward, you still can't afford to do it.
Yeah, and it's so area dependent. It will change. It will be so varied across the country. Now, the good thing is materials have started to come down, but it's still a problem. It's still an issue. We've also got an issue of there's a massive shortage of workers. So you've still got, a shortage of builders, which means that they can charge more because there's not as many of them. There's so many different moving parts to this. But I think at least if we could get the planning situation right and they would come in on time. My personal experience of this is I've had 3 planning applications in the last 12 months. Every single one of those asked for an extension, which means they've gone over their own deadlines, and they've all been pretty straightforward. We're not talking huge, massive new build developments here. These are pretty straightforward. So when you are talking about, the creating more homes and the new builds and the conversions, it's quite normal for these applications to be taking over 12 months, which is too long. That's a really long time. And as we know, things are changing in the economy, things are changing in the property market. We can't sit on something for 12 months to then not really know whether the outcome's going to be a positive or negative one.
No, it's a very fair point. Christina Castellina, good to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed. Give our best to sunny Liverpool.
Nice to see you.
I love Liverpool.
You do?
Yeah, I do.
Actually, it's a lovely city. It is a beautiful city.
It's
got a brilliant museum there.
Oh, has it? I've been to the museum.
Fabulous museum. If you live in Liverpool and you've never been to it, pop
the cathedrals.
Brilliant.
Lovely cathedrals.
The two cathedrals at each end of the same road, aren't they? You can see one from the other.
Stunning.
Yeah. We've got lots more to come on the programme this morning. With NHS dentist costs rising this month, we're going to get all of the top tips from experts on how you can properly take care of your teeth without breaking the bank.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories, controversies and issues.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
It's 5 times the opinion, 5 times the debate, and 5 times the fun. The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You could wink at the end. I can't Britain's wink. Listening.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back. You are watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Angela.
Still to come for you this morning, the Olivier Awards kick off this evening at the Royal Albert Hall, all very fancy. So we'll be talking to our very own Stephanie Tetchy, bringing you all the details at 7:45.
And at 8:45, our South West reporter has been speaking to the boy in the tent who raised over £700,000 for a North Devon hospice by camping in his back garden for 3 years.
So do get in touch. All the usual ways this morning. Drop us an email, whatever you want to talk about. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, earlier in the last week, it was announced that NHS dentistry fees in England are expected to rise, well, no surprise there, but by 8.5%, so it's a bit of a jump. So a checkup will increase from £23.80 to £25.80.
Well, this morning we're joined by Dr. Sam Jethwa, who is here to discuss the importance of good oral hygiene, as well as the best ways to access a dentist amid the cost of living crisis. I have to say, Sam, that I was reading a story this week, a dentist who was going through schools in Norfolk, and he said that something like 22% of the children he saw had never seen a dentist, and they were 6 years old, and that many of the children didn't even have a toothbrush in their house.
Wow.
As a dentist, I mean, I'm shocked by it, but as a dentist, what is that going to mean for the health of people's teeth in the years to come?
Yeah, that is a very concerning statistic, isn't it? I mean, you'd expect 100% everyone to have at least seen a dentist or at least have a toothbrush. So that's interesting. I think the important thing there is education, isn't it? We have to do whatever we can, and the dentist going into the schools is a brilliant step. You know, that's something that we do as well, and that can allow the kids to then go home and talk about the dentistry, and if the parents are more educated, that's also good too. So those sort of initiatives on the grassroots level is probably a good idea.
Sorry, I have to come off the back of that and ask you, does that mean, you know, that in the next however many years we're going to go back to the bad old days when in your 20s and your 30s you had to have false teeth?
We've always in the UK had quite a high statistic of young people having to have lots of teeth removed. Under general anaesthetic in Europe, we have the highest rate of clearance, which means taking out baby teeth, which is not great. So whatever we can do to try and help that, because you're quite right, it's a ticking time bomb. You know, those teeth will eventually cause problems.
Why aren't we more concerned about oral health? Because it's not actually just about our teeth, is it? I mean, oral health can be a link to general health.
Yeah, there are a lot of studies out that do show that certain diseases, such as heart disease and gum disease, have various links. It's a little bit... there is a lot more research that is needed, but what we do know is the risk factors for certain health issues are actually the same as, for example, gum disease. So if somebody is suffering from gum disease, the certain factors that might be at play are diabetes, you know, inflammation, obesity. Those are issues that actually are the same risk factors for gum disease. And so if we can control smoking, you know, have a healthier lifestyle, look after ourselves, we'll also help not only our general health, but our oral health as well.
But isn't one of the big problems that it's only something like 50% of the population that have got access to an NHS dentist? And going to a private dentist for many people is just economically prohibitive. So isn't this where the government needs to step in and actually say to the Royal College of Dentists or whoever, you know, come on, we've got to have more national health dentists to protect our dental health?
And we have a national health crisis generally, but definitely in dentistry. And it's been going on and it's been getting worse and worse. And actually what's happened is after the pandemic, and I hate to bring up that again, but it's still, we're seeing the knock-on effects. And it's actually the ability to provide a high quality of care on the NHS is getting harder for NHS dentists. And that means that so they're suffering from burnout, having to see so many dentists, so many patients in a day for one dentist, and then there's no ability for other patients to get in as these numbers of dentists are dwindling. They're either moving into the private sector to be able to provide the care they want to, or, for example, we recently learned that Bupa, a corporate provider of NHS and private dentistry this week, is closing 85 practices across the country. So it's only getting worse. My advice is prevention.
Well, I was going to say, you're a weird profession. because you come on shows like this and get people to do things which effectively mean they'll have to see you less.
Yeah. Well, that's a good thing.
Which is a good thing. But in terms of that prevention, and obviously you still need to go for your checkups and your hygienist and all the rest of it. But in terms of prevention, we just need to learn how to brush our teeth properly, don't we? How to care about having bleeding gums or bad breath.
I think it's sad that we have to sort of, in this country where we're so used to having access to healthcare, have to now think about having a fund or saving just to access a private dentist, for example. But that would really be the best advice in terms of lifestyle, and anywhere where we can put something aside. Seeing a hygienist twice a year is going to cost you between £100 and £150, let's say, for the whole year. So if that's something that we can put aside, and it's not possible for everybody, but if we can, then that means that we'll take the pressure off and allow the people that really need the access to actually get that access.
In the meantime, we can't let you go. You say you've got to brush your teeth properly. You've got 30 seconds to tell us the best way that we can look after our teeth at home, just buying a toothbrush and the toothpaste.
That would be a good place to start. Buy the toothbrush. It doesn't have to be an expensive one. Brush...
Sorry, firm or soft?
Well, I think that's where you need some advice. You know, definitely don't go too firm, but definitely don't go too soft. It's a medium. It's all about the technique. So what you want to do is first, at the beginning of the day, wake up, brush teeth, eat on clean teeth. Remember that, brush teeth first. If you're brushing teeth after eating, 40 minutes afterwards, so the mouth can neutralise first. And then when you're brushing, it's about angling the toothbrush upwards towards the gum line at the top, downwards towards the gum line at the bottom. Always think about brushing is for your gums, diet is for your teeth. OK, so sugars are for the teeth, brushing is for the gums. Round in a circle, 2 minutes, 30 seconds each corner. Mouthwash if you want, if you don't want, doesn't matter. Don't rinse after the toothpaste. Just spit out the excess toothpaste, leave it on the teeth, allowing the fluoride to stay on your enamel for longer. That will strengthen the teeth. Twice a day.
There you go.
You see, you have to listen to what Dr. Sam has to say, because not only is he a dentist, you also, I say it every time you come in, you've got great teeth. So you're doing something right. Really good to see you, Sam, as always.
Thanks so
very much indeed. But you see, you cannot beat a nice smile.
No.
And having that confidence with your smile.
I tell you
really
what,
important.
his goes, ding.
They do. Fabulous. Look, don't go anywhere. We've got all the news and views from this morning's papers coming up in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back.
Yes.
You're watching.
Don't know who's going first then, Angela. There you go.
After you, Stephen.
No,
After you.
late, always latest first.
Welcome back. As you will have gathered, you were listening to a very discombobulated Angela and Stephen on GB Breakfast News.
Well, let's go through the bill, get ourselves in order now as we go through the papers this morning with writer and journalist Emma Wolfe and the co-founder of the Together Association campaign group, Alan Miller. Good morning to you both, Alan. Let's have a look at the Sunday Telegraph, should we? Their front page, looking at staff who can sue their boss.
Yes, if customers offend them. So this is about a new bill called the Worker Protection Bill that was backed by a couple of Lib Dems, Baroness Burt in particular, on the basis that if staff are offended by things that customers say, whether it's in a pub, whether it's in retail or in the NHS, then they can sue their employers as a consequence. And I really think that this goes way beyond the Equality Act, that this is a very terrible reflection of where we're getting to, which is the idea that when people say things, firstly, that's actual harm. It's like physical violence. That's the first point. And the second thing is that then you get into a litigation, right? You get into a litigious thing, rather than saying, actually, if someone says something silly or stupid or offensive, that you actually say, you actually confront them and you deal with it and you get your peers to reinforce that. And the idea that we're all these terrible people that are all doing all this all the time, right, to one another, rather than predominantly decent people support one another, I think it's utterly wrong. There's some concern because the first part has gone through Parliament on Friday and it should, I think, should definitely be challenged, but reflects a broader issue with our whole you can't say that an offence is like violence.
But don't you just say to someone, excuse me, but actually I found that really unpleasant and I wish you wouldn't talk to me like that.
It's a learning experience. I think Alan's absolutely right. Not only is rushing to litigation ludicrous, I mean, you know, someone offends you, well, deal with it, but also not having those conversations where you say to someone, actually, that hurt me for a specific reason, or I found that offensive because... And then you talk to people, and almost all the time you end up coming to an understanding, or someone says, actually, I'm really sorry, I didn't mean it that way.
But this isn't about it's not about, in a way, what's being said, is it? It's about people saying, I'm offended by that. You can be offended by anything if you want to be.
Well, this is the concern as well, because there is some support for obviously, if there are things that are actually done, there are laws already about that. If you start doing violence or anything like that, but where the question of harassment comes up is also an issue. So, for instance, if someone is in a bookshop and they invite someone, it might be J.K. Rowling or whoever it is, and they have a T-shirt, and a member of the public says something to one of their friends or something to one of each other, and the staff gets offended about that, That then can become an issue. It might say that I believe all women are defined by biology, right? It's now a controversial issue, and that can be seen as offensive. So all of a sudden, we open up the floodgates to kind of legal litigation at a time where we've got enough problems in business. But I agree with you guys. I think the thing is, that old adage that sticks and stones, right, will break my bones. We do need to get more robust and also believe in one another as citizens, that we can convince one another.
Yeah, that we can talk about these
exactly.
things. That it isn't, you don't just immediately, if someone offends you, explain to them why. Have a conversation. You might actually learn something.
Well, that's why we exist.
And we're so
on
frightened
this
these
channel.
days to say anything. I mean, you know, no wonder that we skate around these issues of, you know, saying anything about the trans debate or anything, because it's so frightening to be harassed and to be cancelled and to be, you know, abused for expressing opinions.
Can I just say what I don't understand about the story? But you read it and I haven't, and many of our viewers and listeners won't have done. Why are you then going to sue your boss?
Because they have a duty of care to you.
It's a really good example of the terrible thing that's happening, which is like, why is the government outsourcing censorship by saying that big tech in Silicon Valley, in their terms and conditions in the online safety bill, should be moderating things in a sovereign nation where free speech should be paramount to us, right? It's the same thing. It's an attempt to outsource, to have staff and employers create oversight over that, saying it's a duty of care and it's damaging to the staff and their psychological makeup. And I just think that, you know, this has to be debated widely in public. We need much more debate. The idea that we're all fragile and that we can't cope with things is really damaging, much more damaging than hearing things you don't like.
Yeah.
But I just don't understand how a boss is going to stop someone who comes into a shop and
No, you
insults
can't.
How are you? Because you know, there's nothing on, you know, they haven't got written above their head, I'm going to insult you. How do you
Well, the
know?
logical conclusion of that, Angela, is basically this, that you won't see art on the wall, you won't hear music, you won't have people come into your shops or your pubs.
And people won't speak to each other.
Exactly.
God forbid if you say something that offends someone else and you end up in court.
Yeah, well, it's true. Nonsense. Absolutely crackers. To the Sunday Telegraph, Emma, looking at President Biden not coming to the... This I don't get. He's not coming to the coronation because the US presidents don't come to coronations.
Well, apparently there's a precedent for
There's
US.
a precedent.
He did attend the Queen's funeral.
Yes,
this is
that
an
was
unfolding story.
That was different.
This is an unfolding story, and it's quite interesting, isn't it? Is this... OK, so Biden has said that sources have been saying he probably won't travel on May the 6th to the UK. He'll probably turn down the invitation. What is this about? Is it a snub? What happens to the special relationship? He's actually... The other thing is he's coming to Northern Ireland in April. Is he too old? So the Telegraph is saying he's too old to travel to the UK for the coronation. So he's too old to travel twice across the Atlantic, apparently. They're trying to protect him. He's thought to be running. He's about to announce that he'll be standing again in 2024. If he was successful and were re-elected in 2024, he would be 86 by the time he finished in 2028. They're trying to protect him, apparently. They say, a source says the guy is 80. They space out his big bursts of activity considerably. They don't like to push him around the world too much, which makes him sound very geriatric. I think this is really interesting because, you know, this is the biggest global event since the Queen's funeral. The media is going to be, the coverage around the world is going to be huge. I don't know where this precedent comes from, that US presidents don't attend coronations.
Yes, they don't generally attend royal events because, back to the history and the relationship between the UK and the US.
But he was at the Queen's funeral.
But he was at the Queen's funeral, but that is because, so we're told, because it was the Queen. And it was a different
And this
event.
is the King.
Well, yes, but she was a globally loved figure.
Yeah.
The precedent is they don't come. They're invited, but they don't come. They send a representative.
Yeah. It is interesting that he's coming over to Northern Ireland only weeks before.
I have never been, and I'm sure no one at this table has ever been on Air Force One, but I am assuming...
You never know.
No, but I'm assuming that it's not crowded. It's not like your average, you know, let's take a trip on EasyJet. It's got really comfortable big seats.
It's got beds. Come on, let's be honest. It's got beds and showers and bathrooms.
It must be... I don't see what is so sort of stressful.
No.
Neither do
Whatever
I.
your age,
And also,
to getting on a plane
he
and
could
being
have-
gently flown across the Atlantic.
And I bet you he could have a week or two in between. If he didn't want to do the trip twice, I'm sure he could have a week in a beautiful house in Ireland and then pop over to London for the coronation.
But they don't come to the coronation. The other royal families will come to the coronation, but political heads of state don't.
And yet we rush over to their inaugurations.
I know we do, but then, you know, we're always wanting to garner favour with the Americans, aren't we?
Yes.
Right. Alan, the unspoken dangers of an ever-popular pastime. Which pastime and what are the dangers?
Well, this is something very close to my heart because it's to do with wild swimming and it's to do with, around the UK, it's become much more popular. It has been popular in the Nordic countries for quite some time.
You do it?
I do it.
I
Cold
do.
water swimming.
Do you?
Yeah, absolutely. Love it. Not seriously like Alan does, but I absolutely... Cold water therapy. After my shower in the morning, I take a cold shower as well.
So do I.
So good for you.
Doesn't it wake you up?
It's it's an antidepressant. It's the best thing in the world. Even
You're
in
on
winter. It's
crackers.
brilliant.
It's fantastic. I mean, it's like a bit like the Wim Hof thing.
Wim Hof.
It's to give a deep breathing. It's really good to get everything going, right?
You
But
softie.
without
Not in a
being
million
overly,
years.
without being overly dramatic about it, this is a concern. I mean, this is also close to my heart because when I've been doing a lot of staycations the last few years, and I was in Norfolk and we were swimming, and we all got really sick, and we saw some stuff that looked a bit browny, but I thought I was being overly dramatic. Then it turns out it's one of these pollution spillages that are going out through into the sea, and in the Telegraph and in other papers, but today it's got a chronicle in sports section about all of these issues from Bournemouth to around the west and east coast, where you've got, and this is an infrastructure problem. This is about broken Britain, about the fact that we need to address services, we need to get infrastructure, we should have a robust improvement and development, R&D, research and development and infrastructure, and get it resolved.
Yeah.
So we can do it. It needs to get done. But people should still do some cold showers as well.
No, I think you're all talking nonsense. Emma Wolf, Alan Miller, thank you very much
Stephen,
indeed. And not in a million
wakes
years.
you up in
a
the
nice
morning.
hot bath.
Yes,
thank you
then
very
the cold
much.
shower afterwards. It just wakes you up.
Ruins it. Anyway, if you've got a view on that, let us know. In the meantime, let's just quickly bring you up to date with some of the headlines. And this is a serious one, actually. 3 British men are being held in Taliban custody in Afghanistan. They include the so-called danger tourist Miles Routledge, who had to be rescued from Kabul by British forces less than 2 years ago. The Foreign Office says it's working hard to make contact with the British nationals.
The Home Secretary will introduce new measures to tackle child sexual abuse and take on grooming gangs. Writing in the Mail on Sunday, Suella Braverman has announced that those working with children will have a legal duty to report signs or suspicions of sex child abuse.
And £8 million of our money is going to be spent offering public authorities a portrait of the King. Schools, courts, councils, police forces will be able to claim the official picture as part of a new government scheme. Oh, now we need to get all very grand and thespian because it's the Olivier Awards tonight at the Royal Albert Hall. Stephanie Tetcher is here. Good morning.
It's the best night on the calendar for the theatre world. I'm really looking forward to the Olivier Awards.
Are you going?
I wish. Do you know what? I'd done something really bad and I forgot it was coming up and then I missed the accreditation for it. So the PR was like, Stephanie, we can't let you in this year. But it's OK. Sometimes I prefer to watch these things from the comfort of my sofa. So it is going to be a very big night for theatre. Some big nominations. My Neighbour Totoro. It's based on the 1988 animation film. Have you guys watched that before?
No.
Oh, fabulous animation film. But it had a record box office sellout at the Barbican Theatre. And that's up for 9 nominations tonight. So I think that's going to do really well. Best actress there is going to be Mae Mack. She's up for a nomination, but she's going to face stiff competition from Jodie Comer, who starred in Prima Facie. And it was a one-woman show, and she plays this criminal defence barrister who her view changes on the legal system after she's been sexually assaulted herself. So she's up for that. Then also we've got Paul Mescal, who's up for Best Actor in A Street Named called Desire.
He's very much on the rise, isn't he?
Yeah, he is, because, you know, he was nominated for BAFTA, he was nominated for an Oscar, but he's done really well in this theatre show, so I think it'll be really well. But he faces also stiff competition from David Tennant.
Well, what was David Tennant?
He was in Good, so it's really a definitive play about the Holocaust, and he plays a German professor who's... changes his views in the play as well, so he's really good in that as well. But also he's up against Tom Hollander as well for his performance in Patriots as well. But it's going to be quite an animated ceremony, and there'll be performances from Sister Act. So we'll see Beverly Knight taken to the stage. Greece will be performing as a dedication to Arlene Phillips, who's up for a special award for all of her contributions to the theatre.
She's a choreographer, of course.
Yes. So it'll be quite interesting. It's going to be a 3-hour show. It starts at 10 o'clock on ITV.
What I find interesting about it is that it tends to be, I mean, all the names that you've mentioned and the performances you've mentioned are all London-based, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
How often do people in the regions get to see these, and how often do regional performances actually get nominated?
Well, like, you know, some of the plays, because mostly London is where most of the plays are always shown, so I think it's until a play goes out, like, to different areas, that's where it can really get that credibility. Yes, and then comes back in. One of the plays, actually, I can't remember what it's named, but one of the plays is actually based in Sheffield, and actually it's going to be nominated tonight as well, and that started in Sheffield and then came back to London, so there are some few good ones. Yeah.
I do think it's interesting with theatre when you say you get it all in the West End, but when it does go out and you can see it in your local theatre, it's a great night out.
And, you know, the theatre world has had a really shaky few years since the pandemic, so it's quite good to see that it's back on its feet and people are being nominated for their work and highlighted for it. I mean, it's going to be a big night because we have over 27 nominations which are going to first-time acting performance, including Rose Ayling-Ellis, the deaf EastEnders actress star, and she's going to be up for Best Supporting Actress, so hopefully she can win as well.
Well, I hope you get your glad rags on tonight. You might be on the sofa, but get your glad rags on.
Yes, and tomorrow, of course, the papers will be filled with the frocks.
They will. They will. Stephanie, thank you. As always. I'd give you an award.
Oh,
I would.
Thank you.
We've got all your top stories coming up in just a moment after your weather.
Hello there, very good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Sunday is looking like the better half of the weekend for many of us, and that is partly thanks to high pressure that has built its way in for the day, helping to settle things down for a lot of us. We do just, though, have a little squeeze in the isobars across the far southeast of England, and that's just bringing a bit more of a breeze throughout today, so certainly across parts of East Anglia down into Kent as well. It will feel quite chilly in there, but the cloud is breaking up across central eastern areas of England and into the Scottish borders as well to provide a good number of sunny intervals as we head throughout the afternoon. Cloud just lingering a bit more across southwest England, Wales, up into Northern Ireland and areas of Scotland as well. We can't rule out the odd spot of rain or drizzle here, but it should stay largely dry. Western areas also seeing some of the highest temperatures throughout the day, perhaps 13 degrees across the southern areas, just that bit cooler again where you are on those eastern coastal sites. The cloud in the west will continue to break up as we move throughout this evening, and a lot of us will hold on to some clear intervals throughout the night. That will allow temperatures to drop away, and certainly we could be dropping down to frost levels across many rural areas of England and Wales, even down to -1, -2s in a few towns and cities as well. Just holding up a bit more across the far northwest where we've got a bit more cloud in place, and the breeze will also strengthen here across Northern Ireland, northwest Scotland as we head into Monday. The sunshine hazier across the northwest, but for many other areas it's going to be another day of sparkling sunshine and a really nice start to the new week and the Easter holidays if you are heading out for that. Temperatures around where they should be for the time of year, highs generally around 10 to 13 degrees Celsius. High pressure is looking to stay in charge as we head throughout the new working week, but fronts do want to push their way in, particularly to northwestern areas as we head towards the middle part of the week. So Northern Ireland and Scotland, just watch out for a bit of rain as we head towards Wednesday.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Extra sailings have been put on overnight in Dover to try to clear the huge backlog of travellers.
A very good morning to you. It is 8 o'clock on Sunday, the 2nd of April. It is so good to have your company here on Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Angela. Here are your top stories this morning.
Well, it's been a night of misery for some travellers as ferry operators in Dover have had to put on additional overnight sailings trying to clear the backlog of Easter traffic.
Russia has assumed the presidency of the United Nations Security Council despite outrage from Ukrainian officials. We're going to have an expert analysis and be speaking to a Ukrainian MP.
And it was a big night for boxing, but did Anthony Joshua manage to overcome his 2-year drought? We'll tell you more in a few minutes with Aidan McGee.
And as ever, you can join in any of our discussions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk. Lots of you have done it already. Thank you. We do love to hear what you think.
So we start with the news that ferry operators have had to lay on additional overnight sailings from the port of Dover as they work through a backlog of Easter traffic.
Strong winds, a large volume of coaches and slower processing times at border control have all been cited as causes.
Well, let's talk to travel guru Simon Calder, who joins us now. What's going on, Simon? What's the latest?
OK, well, I've been keeping in touch with a number of passengers and a number of coach organisers and, of course, the port itself, as well as the ferry operators. Now, things are getting slightly better in that I expect that by lunchtime, maybe early afternoon, the vast backlog of coaches will be cleared. But there's actually a good reason for that, and that is that most of the coaches that we're talking about here, Stephen, are school groups who raced off on first day of the main Easter holidays, as did university groups and so on. And they obviously wanted to get away as swiftly as possible. There is not going to be anything like such a surge today, and so it's effectively clearing the backlog. That will be done, as you say, extra sailings to make sure that as soon as that coach is cleared, it can drive straight onto a ferry and get over to Calais or Dunkirk. But honestly, the stories I'm hearing, the misery of 16, 18-hour waits, it quite often in three different places. You start off in the cruise terminal, which is across the other side of town from the what we're looking at here, which is the main port of Dover. There's a secondary holding point. And then when you finally get to the entrance to the port, which we're just looking at now, it's about another 4 or 5 hours before you are processed by French border control, because of course the checks take place on this side of the channel, and you're finally allowed to get on that ship. Teachers, drivers doing a fantastic job, but of course we're now going to be in the situation where, well, driver hours are going to become a problem because they've just been up all night. It's a miserable situation, and my heart goes out to them, as I'm sure yours and yours in the studio does too. Awful times.
Simon, we were talking earlier in the programme about this. Before I come to you with a question that I wanted to ask you, I did read that you said that you had actually seen people getting out of their cars and dancing just to while away the hours. Is that true? Did you see people doing that on the side of the road?
Well, no, I haven't done. I mean, we certainly saw, let me take you back to last July, we saw a lot of that sort of malarkey going on because, of course, we had, again, and it's a very analogous situation. It was the very first time since COVID and since Brexit that families were able to escape in the car. They've been used to the idea right up until 2020 that you just get in the car, you turn up at the port, you sort of wave your passports out the window and off you go onto the ferry. And they discovered that actually the extra checks that we signed up for mean that it's much more complicated than that. So we had lots of dancing on beside the A20 last year. Don't think anybody's dancing in the coach park in Dover right now. They are clearly trying to get through. There's no compensation payable for this because it's effectively nobody's fault. And if I may, the areas that I'm pretty sure on your excellent network and politicians elsewhere will be focusing on, I'm fairly confident in predicting that within a couple of hours, ministers will be coming out. They will be blaming the French for wanting to check stuff. And then they will be saying, we are going to put a cap on the number of coaches that can go through. And that really is the only fix that is going to work. The idea that you limit the number of people who can get on the coaches and the number of coaches that are going through. The Port of Dover is saying that they got 15% more than they anticipated, which helps to explain some of the backlog. But we can't see scenes like this again. And unfortunately, the fundamentals, which is that you're dealing with a very constrained location and there is simply not room to put in place, to double the number of checks, means that it's not going to go away soon. You and Stephen earlier were talking about possibly moving to other ports, and that will certainly happen. I think other ports, so particularly New Haven going across Dieppe and then various destinations from Dover, forgive me, from Portsmouth, all the checks are done on the French side. So you just get on the ship as normal. You have to wait a couple of hours at the other side. Well, that's annoying, but it's not nearly as bad as this. And I think an awful lot of coach parties will simply give up and fly next time, which, of course, environmentalists will be very unhappy about.
How does this stack up with what we normally see? Because we talk to you every year, Simon, don't we, about these sort of backlogs at this time of year. Is this substantially worse than what we've seen in the past?
It is absolutely new for me, and it is because, well, last July we had all the families getting away and they were snarled up for 16, 18 hours. This time, and just imagine, you're a school, you've had COVID, you want to organise excursions, of course you do. It's a fantastic opportunity for kids to get out and see more of the world, but it's really the first opportunity you've had since COVID and since Brexit. Everybody, coach schools from across Britain want to send their lovely students away, and unfortunately everybody converged on Dover all at the same time. You had a surge in demand that came up against the reality that there is simply not enough space, not enough processing available for large numbers of people, and that we're living in a different world now.
We did speak to you an hour ago, as you know, at the head of our 7 o'clock hour. And one of the things that we mentioned then was possibly moving to other ports. And we always ask people for their comments. And I have to say, we had loads and loads of our viewers and listeners picking up on the things that you were saying. And indeed, Tony from Worcestershire did say, taking Angela's question about other ports taking the excess traffic, why not reinstate the port of Ramsgate? I mean, how practical is it? Because we talked about the fact that at Dover there is no more room for more coaches. How practical is it going to be in the next 18 months before the fingerprint checking and the facial recognition comes in, that actually some of these other ports could be opened up so that we can have a free flow of traffic through to France?
Look, Tony is absolutely right. I would love to see, for example, yes, certainly Ramsgate. There's Sheerness in Kent, various points on the in East Anglia. There used to be 3 sailings a day from Great Yarmouth to Amsterdam. It would be fantastic to see more ferries going across, and perhaps that will be one of the solutions. But it's a mess at the moment. And, well, as you mentioned, with the entry-exit system and fingerprinting required, it is set to get trickier still. But yes, I would love to see that. And also, I've had loads of comments since we talked an hour ago, mostly along the lines of, hang on, we used to have our passports checked before we left the EU. It's exactly the same. Well, it isn't, because all that the officer could do was check, is this Angela's passport? Is it a genuine travel document? Yes, it is, and let you go. They did not have to check through, see how often you'd spent in the European Union and stamp the passport. So, yeah, it's a different world. We asked for every single British traveller to be checked. If people are lucky enough to have, say, an Irish passport, then, again, they get a really easy time. But British passport holders, we've asked for tougher checks, and we've got exactly what we signed up for.
Oh, there you go. Simon, good to see you. Thanks very much indeed. It has got you pretty sort of irate, really. John, hi John, says it's time to stagger school holidays. I was on the ferry last week and it was virtually empty.
Nigel says, I'm never going to go abroad again. Airports, ferries, they're all too busy and horrible. It's the Lake District for me. And good choice, Nigel.
Yes,
Lovely.
excellent.
Yes.
Well done you, sir. Well done you. But Dave from Poole says, go and check all this out for yourselves. It's not just the change in process. You do not have all the lanes open or all the booths manned.
And we were talking quite at length about the fact that 8 million is going to be spent on putting portraits of the King in all sort of major offices. You were saying, I think, which was picked up by an awful lot of our viewers and listeners, that that was an awful lot of money and you
were
at
this time
unhappy about it. But Andy says, though it is a lot of money for the King's portrait, can we please not realise that the money does not go to the King, it goes to the employees of print companies, etc., who are going to be employed in printing them?
Well, it does keep people in work. It does keep people in work. The problem is, though, it's our money. And do we not want to, you know, could you not spend it on nurses, teachers, care, the care system? I mean, no, 8 million quid doesn't actually go very far.
No, it's a drop in the ocean, isn't it, unfortunately. I know it sounds a lot, but actually in the real scheme of things, it's tuppence.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
But should we be spending it on photographs of the King? Don't know. I like the idea of having pictures of the monarch. I think it's good, but I don't know if I'd pay that money now. Not now.
No.
So.
Right. Well, Keir Starmer may well have weighed in over the Dover queues, which is what we were talking about just now, but he's also under fire from his own side. Former Blair ally Lord Mandelson has called on him to be bolder.
Yes, he wants a Labour leader to put forward a manifesto to change the face of Britain by reforming public services and tackling huge inefficiencies. Let's get some reaction from our political reporter, Catherine Forster, who joins us now. Morning to you, Catherine. What are we to make of Mandelson sort of wading in on this at this time, 18 months or so before an election?
Yes, interesting timing, isn't it? A year and a half potentially till the next election, but only, of course, a few short weeks till the local elections across England, which Labour are hoping to make significant gains in. So we have Peter Mandelson, of course, a very close ally of Tony Blair, a real architect of new Labour, saying that the current Labour leader, Keir Starmer, needs to be much bolder, talking about fresh thinking and boldness that's needed from Labour. Reform, not huge expenditure of money, saying that public services need radical reform, and it is not just a question of throwing ever-increasing money at public services, particularly their health service, of course, which takes a larger and larger share of money every year. He's particularly singled out the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, who's been very notable by suggesting pretty bold reforms, use of technologies, reforms to GP services, the sorts of things which may set him on a collision path with many in the medical profession if and when Labour come to power. But really, I think this goes to a worry that many people have about Labour and the Labour leader specifically, that although they are about 20% ahead in the polls, people are not excited about the prospect of voting Labour. It's more that so many people are really fed up with the Conservative government that they think it's time for a change. And Peter Mandelson feels but that in itself is not sufficient. They need to be making a bolder, more exciting, more radical offering. Keir Starmer, when you ask focus groups about him, the words that come up are competent, intelligent, but also boring. And so at the moment, Labour are spending a lot of time saying what the Conservatives are doing wrong, but not that much time laying out clearly what they would do differently. And obviously Peter Mandelson feels that that needs to change.
Hey, Catherine, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
I quite like boring politics, though, at the minute, to be honest. I mean, I know some dynamism from a leader is actually a good thing. However, just at the minute, boring seems quite nice.
Yeah, just let everything settle down.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what we want. Yeah, boring but competent.
Yes, well,
yeah,
competent.
important.
Isn't it funny how words like competent come up, but it's not exactly a compliment, is it, to say someone's competent?
Well, just get on with the job that we've employed you to do, please.
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed, and run the country properly. Now, Russia has assumed the presidency of the United Nations Security Council. The position, which rotates monthly between the 15 members, is largely procedural.
Yeah. Meanwhile, though, the Ukrainian president has expressed outrage, previously having called for the council to be dissolved altogether. The United States has said it was unable to block Russia from assuming the presidency.
Today, a terrorist state began to chair the UN Security Council. Russia is chairing the UN Security Council. It's hard to imagine anything that proves more the total bankruptcy of such institutions. Reform is obviously overdue to prevent a terrorist state and any other state that wants to be a terrorist from destroying the peace.
Well, we're joined now by Ukrainian MP Kira Rudik. Kira, thank you for joining us. I think it's quite clear that your president is absolutely furious at this decision. Are you generally disappointed that the UN were not able to find some way of ensuring that actually the president's role of president could go to someone different other than the Russians at this time?
Hello, thank you so much for having me. Indeed, we are all disappointed here that a year and 1 month since the full-scale invasion started and war crimes were committed was not enough for so many smart and bright people in the UN to figure out a way so that Russia would not assume presidency. Especially painful that it happened on exactly 1 year anniversary since the war crimes of Bucha and Irpin were uncovered and those cities were liberated. Here we were mourning for the victims of this full-scale invasion and the crimes that happened to people for absolutely no reason. And in the same time, Russia is allowed to continue operating like as usual. And this indeed calls for shame for the organization like United Nations, because for a year we were calling for the reform, for the change that would show that the organization that is there to keep the peace of the whole world, to prevent the wars like are happening right now in my country to happen. They failed in it. And the minimum thing to do was not only to condemn the dictator, not only to condemn the country aggressor, but also to do something. Look back for a year and let's ask ourselves, what did United Nations do and what they are supposed to do? And I think it's obvious for everyone that they have not been effective, they have not been efficient, and the maximum thing that have been done was what? Sending angry emails to Russia and Belarus. And right now what is happening is that United Nations watchdog MAGATE visited the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant that is a huge threat of the nuclear security for the whole Europe. And they returned back and said, we can do nothing. So my question is, are we here for the effectiveness or are we here for just like waving hands?
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, we talked to an expert earlier on who said it is almost impossible for the UN to change the presidency rules. It's almost impossible for them to remove a permanent member like Russia or to stop them vetoing things. And as you say, they went to the nuclear plant and said, well, there's nothing we can do here now. Is it just time then for the UN to be got rid of?
I want to for all of us to understand that United Nations is an organization of people. There is not some like a higher power that is there that would be saying, oh, do this or do that. It's an agreement throughout the world leaders and throughout the world countries to do certain things the certain way. So if the rules are there, why they cannot be changed? And this is something that is quite unspeakable for me. And yes, then the United Nations just proves their own bankruptcy. That is true. They are not able to operate and, of course, are not able to execute on the goal and the purpose that they set for themselves. They will not be able to do so while not only for Russia, but also for China, there are not some clear rules that would limit authoritarian regimes from influencing the United Nations of achieving its goals.
Kira, it is only for a month that they're going to have the presidency. And the Russian ambassador to the United Nations, Vasily, I think he's called Nebenzia, he says he's going to be very active during that time. What kind of damage do you think he might be able to do during that month of his presidency?
He would do what Russia does. He would spread the propaganda. He would try to split and break the unity of the democratic states that is very strong right now. He will be diminishing all the work that has been done in the United Nations for the last year. And again, it is not about the result of their presidency. It's about the fact that a year into the full-scale invasion, a country still can assume it. It is a sign for all the authoritarian regimes there. Well, you can start a full-scale war and then get away with it. The world will still allow you to do because they would not find some legal ways of pushing you away. And when we have politicians proclaiming that Russia should become isolated, that they are doing everything possible to push Russia down and make sure that they are suffering, well, look at what is happening in the United Nations and let's say, no, not everything is being done right now.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Kira. Thank you so much. And I think all of our viewers can totally understand why you are also very angry at the moment in Ukraine. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Do you know what? It is our job as journalists to try and challenge the guests on whatever they're talking about.
Yeah.
That's why we remain impartial. However, when it comes to this, it seems to beg belief.
I know.
That a country that is where the president has been accused of war crimes can then become the president or hold the presidency of the United Nations Security Council.
Yes.
Surely there should be a caveat in there somewhere that would stop that from happening.
Or you would think that the brains that run the United Nations would have come up with a way of possibly finding an excuse or a reason why they should not have it now. But clearly not.
It's extraordinary.
Anyhow, but we're not at the United Nations.
No.
No, we should be, clearly. There's a lot more to come in the programme, including a look at this weekend's sport, including an update from the Formula One Australian Grand Prix.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories, controversies and issues.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
It's 5 times the opinion, 5 times the debate, and 5 times the fun. The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You could wink at the end.
I can't believe I can't
Britain's
wink,
listening.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
A very warm welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Angela, and it's just coming up to 8:30.
Still to come on the programme, our Southwest reporter has been talking to the boy in the tent. It doesn't look like that anymore. He's been in his tent for 3 years. He's raised more than £700,000 for North Devon Hospice, and we'll be getting the latest on that at 8:45.
And at 9:15, we're going to hear from the 16-year-old who is walking 15,000 steps a day so that he can raise awareness for World Autism Awareness Day.
Yeah, 2 nice, inspirational young men doing their bit. I like that. It's
good.
nice that we give young people a bit of a hard time, but there's 2 good ones out there. Drop us an email if you've got anything to talk about this morning. Lots of you have already. gbviews@gbnews.uk. And we have some very, very sensible viewers and listeners. Good morning to Marion from Ross-on-Wye. I'm with you, Stephen. If you want to get read out, that's how you start your emails. A nice hot bath. I'd like to go cold swimming, but she's got Raynaud, which means feet, hand, nose and ears will shut down in the cold water. I've tried cold showers, but feel so cold when I get out. Yes, a nice hot bath, really piping hot
We should explain.
bubbles.
This is because we've got Alan doing the papers who does swimming,
Cold water
swimming.
swimmer.
And both Emma Wolf and I, who's also doing the papers, we agreed that after our hot shower in the morning, we both, well, not together, clearly, but in our separate bathrooms, we take cold showers, because I reckon it wakes you up. It just goes zing like that.
Blimey.
No.
Can't imagine anything worse, frankly. But anyway.
Try it.
No, I'm not. I can't bring myself to do it. I cannot. Ada McGee's here. Good morning. Have you ever done this cold shower nonsense?
No, it's interesting. So I was always a bath man.
Oh, yeah.
And then I moved into my new place about 18 months ago, and the bath's just too... It's very trendy, but it's got this big sort of arced taps. But it's a very high-sided bath. It's a bit narrow. I can get in, but your feet are hanging over the edge of it. It's not very comfortable, and it takes ages, because it's so high-sided, it takes ages to fill up.
Oh.
So I just use my shower. I've got 2 showers in the property, so I just use one of those, and the bath is just there.
What, hot or cold?
Oh, yeah, that was a question. Well, remember I had a 3-minute shower last summer. That was hot. I don't think I could have done it.
No, I don't remember that.
Do you ever stand under a cold shower?
No, I wouldn't do that.
No.
I wouldn't do that, because I think... No, it just makes you feel uncomfortable. It's cold enough. I have the heat off at the moment to save on energy bills, so I'd be cold in the shower and out of it. Yes, let's do that.
Yeah, AJ. So he won, but I
He did.
have to say... the commentators saying, well, it was convincing on points,
No.
but I don't think it was convincing.
No, not at all. I mean, look, he's conceded himself after he said it would have been nice to get the knockout. Yes, he got the job done, but we kind of always expected him to do that anyway. He just looked like somebody who... And let's be clear, first of all, he won unanimously. He was comfortable. But with a bit more belief, I think Jermaine Franklin, who was far better than I expected him to be, he could have won that fight. He was very durable. He was a good mover. He took a lot of punches.
Rounds, didn't he?
He did. Yeah. I mean, I did have AJ ahead on most of those rounds. I think it was if we're looking at just points in totality, AJ was a comfortable winner, but with a bit more belief, I think Franklin could have done it. And he's lacking a bit of confidence at the moment, AJ. I think that comes off the back of 2 defeats, 2 chastening defeats as well, where he was clearly outclassed by Alexander Usyk in the last 2 years. Karl Froch saying afterwards, I can't see anything in that performance that convinced me that AJ wants to be world champion again. Dylan White, who could be a future opponent for AJ, saying that he lacked that killer instinct. And, you know, when you've got £300 million in the bank, maybe that's something to do with it. Maybe it's the fact that...
You keep going on about that.
Well, it's important. Karl Froch, a little bit, yeah. Karl Froch made that point. He said, when you made that so much money, what's your motivation? You've got to remember where Anthony was coming from 7-8 years ago when he was first introduced to professional boxing. And, you know, he said to me himself, he said, I'm only 1 knockout away from not having any earning potential anymore. Those days are gone.
Can I just throw a spanner in the works and say that very early this morning when I was listening to the World Service, what they were saying there was that because he didn't have the knockout, which was what everyone expected and what he should have done, that an awful lot of pundits are now saying he's proving that actually he's at the end of his career.
Yeah, look, it sounds harsh to say that, but you know what? Someone said that to me this morning on WhatsApp, and I hadn't really couched it in those terms. Yeah. But I'm starting to think, will he ever get back to what he was 5 years ago? When you've been in the ring, Andrew, and you've almost been emaciated in a way, because you're talking about a fighter who was... Usyk just proved himself so much better. Yeah, he was so much smaller. And I think putting him in against Franklin, who was a bit smaller, was designed to get the kind of cobwebs out of him, to try and work, to see if he can find a way to beat smaller opponents. And yes, he did win, and it was relatively comfortable on points. But as I say, it went the distance. He never looked like knocking him out, and he needed that statement win, a showreel knockout that we were talking about, and he wasn't there. And look, I just don't know where he goes from here, because he's most likely to fight Dillian Whyte next, I would have thought, but I'm not sure he wins that fight right now. He certainly doesn't beat Fury. He certainly doesn't beat Deontay Wilder, but he will argue that at least he's on a winning trail. They'll have to carefully pick his opponent next. It's almost like he's restarting his career. But at the age of 33, as Eddie Hearn said last night, they're running out of time to get this fight in the ring if it's going to happen with Fury. We get very frustrated in the heavyweight division at the moment that the fights we want to see don't happen because of promoters' interest, because of commercial interest, because of TV interest. That's got to be put to one side, and let's hope we get those decent fights, because only then will we really find out how good Anthony Joshua is. OK, let's have a look at the football, should we? Haaland wasn't in for Man City. Didn't matter.
Didn't matter.
No, it didn't. Mahrez stepped up. They went behind. Normally when Liverpool go ahead, home or away, they usually seal the deal. But no, they went ahead and then conceded 4 goals. So that kept up the pressure on Arsenal. But whatever Manchester City can do, Arsenal can do just as well. They also won 4-1 against Leeds United, and they looked eminently more comfortable. But with Manchester City, the squad will matter now, because they've got at least 13 games to go, because they're still in the FA Cup and they're still in the Champions League. They'll want to go deep into those competitions. So they'll need their squad, because they're going to be playing more games than Arsenal. But Arsenal looks so good. Since they lost against Manchester City at home on February the 15th, they've rattled off 7 wins, Angela. You know, that's what champions do. That's quite a chastening experience, being at home by the team that's challenging you, by the team who are champions. There's every excuse then for a team who hasn't won the league in, 19 years, there's every excuse then to go back in your shell and fall away. They haven't done that. They've come back, and they've really hit back hard, and that's really impressive. And they have to play each other, of course, at the Etihad in a couple of weeks' time. But both teams looked excellent yesterday. Liverpool I do worry about a little bit, because we saw yesterday in the second half the team was a bit disjointed. You had players there who... I mean, Trent Alexander-Arnold was an England player all day long up until a year ago. He got absolutely schooled yesterday by Jack Grealish, and he's looking very low on confidence. They're lacking a bit of experience in key areas, Liverpool, and I think there's a rebuilding process done. Problem is they're trying to sell the club. If you're selling the club, are you really going to load loads of transfer fees onto the club? If you're trying to sell the thing, I would say probably not. But even so, it's looking into a really good race at the moment at the top.
We should just talk very quickly about what's happening in the Australian Grand Prix, because it is happening as we speak, and there's been a bit of drama there already. Yeah, well,
incredibly, they've decided to restart the final lap, 8:33, so it should be a minute over. There was some huge controversy with the crash. Lewis Hamilton was in second place, Max Verstappen was first, but 3 red flags, which you don't see very often. They were deciding at which point to do the restart from. On the 1, 2 and 3 on the podium finishes. But yeah, we should be. We don't know what they are right now, because the race is literally a minute old. But I should be able to give you an update on that next hour.
Okay. Lovely. Aidan, thank you very much indeed. See you at 9:15 or thereabouts. We've got much more to come for you, though, in the next few minutes, including a last look at the papers with Alan Miller and Emma Wolfe.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to. by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. I hope you're having a good Sunday, including watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Angela.
Yes, and we'll entertain you with the papers now. Joining us today, writer and journalist Emma Wolfe and the co-founder of the Together Association, Alan Miller. Good morning to you both. Let's talk dresses, Emma, in the Sunday Telegraph. Summer dresses.
Or not being able to wear them. This is an email that went out from a school in Lincolnshire saying, due to our pupil voice, the option to wear a red gingham dress, so your summer dress, your summer uniform, has been removed due to our gender-neutral policy. So little girls as young as 3 are no longer able to wear a summer dress. The school then quickly, there was an outrage, there was an absolute outrage. They have to wear shorts or gender-neutral things. Anyway, the school then very quickly rode back and said, oh no, this was nothing to do with our gender-neutral policy, but there's been a real outrage amongst parents saying, hang on a minute, my daughter was really looking forward to getting into her summer dress.
Well, I don't understand why a gender... I mean, look, I'm pro a lot of these gender issues, which I know is not always a popular thing to say. I think we're all getting our knickers in a twist over stuff that doesn't affect most of us. However, even if you were the most woke person on the planet, there can't be any reason for a little girl
not being allowed
to wear a dress if she wants to.
If she wants to wear a dress, or a boy, for that matter, if that's the if that's the route they want to go down.
Why not?
Surely that would be the option. Apparently, lots of the little kids were very, very upset. A mum I know was, involved in this and was very, very sad about this. And then the school rode back on this and said, oh, actually, no, it's to do with keeping parental costs down, the uniform, so that we have a sort of standard year-round uniform. And I suppose this is the way that we're going, but it just makes me happy that I grew up in a time when I was able to wear my summer dress and it was, a highlight of the warm weather.
I do think parents and adults should weigh in as much as they can, and the public should have its voice, because what seems to me is that a lot of these ideas and these policies have come through institutions and civil services by some very effective activist campaign groups, but they've sidestepped having a public debate and winning over the public to it. So I think as soon as the public starts hearing about these things and engaging with it, often they think that this is completely preposterous. There's a tiny group of people that are promoting these things. So I would always advocate as much of the public to have its say as possible, because and that means also parents having a say in making.
But Alan, we shouldn't have to be fighting these battles endlessly about things like school uniform for 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds who are looking forward to wearing their summer dress, and then have the school lying and saying, "Oh, actually, it was an additional cost for parents to have the option of a summer dress."
Why don't I tell you what I don't understand? I don't know whether you would go along with this or not, Alan. I think Emma, you might. But why don't we just live and let live?
Live and let live.
And just if people want to. If the girls want to wear a summer dress, fine. If the boys want to wear a summer dress, fine. I don't really care.
And if the girls want to wear shorts, that's okay, fine. If they want to wear trousers, women wear trousers.
Why can't we just let people do what they want?
Well, I'm really a firm believer of that. But what people will say to make the alternative argument is that children don't make any decisions. They're heavily informed by parents and others around them. But I think it should be really... we've got to the point where we're adopting, appropriating all these things that most people do not agree with. So we need to get back to some common sense, and the public is always the best barometer of this. It keeps us honest with it.
It does, and there's a reason why... Sorry, but there's a reason why adults are adults and we're parents and children are children. Right. And, when you see the scandals recently at the Tavistock Clinic, gender reassessment, all of that, it's when it gets dangerous.
I reckon that if you were to say to a little girl...
It's very confusing for young children.
I think if you were to... You say children don't have the choice. I think if you were to say to a little girl... Here, I'll pop it. Look, there's this and it's in red and white gingham, or do you want to wear this to school today? The child will make its decision. And if the child wants to wear the frock, they should wear the frock. If they want to wear the shorts and the T-shirt, they can wear that. And that's what
And that's absolutely fine. But in winter, you say to them, you're putting on a warm jumper, you're putting on a jacket. We are still parents. We are still grown-ups.
And also, there are things called school uniforms, and schools actually should stick to what they decided.
You make an interesting point, though, Alan, saying, well, these things are being forced upon us that the majority of people don't agree with. And I think that will resonate with a lot of people. But there is an issue with that, isn't there? There was a time when most people in this country, going back quite a lot of decades now, thankfully, but most people were a bit racist. And there was a time when people were homophobic.
You're right.
And so action had to be taken. That actually, if you'd had a referendum, people wouldn't have agreed with it.
Well, but how do we get that action? That's about winning hearts and minds. It's not about disingenuously trying to programme children who are not conscious properly, fully yet. It's about winning hearts and minds. The anti-racist argument had to be won in Britain. Many people fought very hard to convince people and explain and discuss, and said we have to win a majority of the population over to this. People started living together. A whole range of things had to happen. As it happens, the Acid House movement contributed a bit. I was involved with that. I think it was very good. But the point being, that wasn't just imposed in this kind of doctrinaire way on toddlers and children.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point.
We should move on because... Actually, Alan, I'm not sure that we are, because we're going to a story in the Times which says victims of liberal intolerance apparently abound, according to the Times.
Well, it's a very interesting article, and I think we're all familiar. Anyone who's been on social media in any way is familiar with this, but Hadley Freeman is writing about a number of things, but she starts off talking about a friend of hers who's a well-known writer, who she doesn't mention by name, but who liked one of her posts, one of her tweets, that talked about sex being biological. Obviously, it's a controversial issue today. People are, in some areas, on Twitter, certainly. Her friend was then uninvited, was cancelled from the fashion show because someone that was trans there, and thought it would be offensive and damaging and harmful to them. Now, this is an example of the monitoring of policing of what you write and language and what you like and post. And there's a chilling effect of all of this, which is people are nervous about saying things and doing things in the public domain. And when people say, what are all these people talking about cancel culture? It's across the board. She goes on to talk about academics in the academy are writing about it. We see that there are physical attacks. In fact, today I think Baroness Fox is talking at Speaker's Corner on just this issue at 3 o'clock. But the point being that now, with the online safety bill, it flatters some of these things even more and says that the terms and conditions, Silicon Valley, big tech should be deciding about this, which often we know the mores of them, having seen the Twitter files and many other things, PayPal and Eventbrite and others cancelling speech that is legal in this country if they don't like it, pulling people off platforms. We have to address this issue, and I think it's really important that we say we're adults, we can cope with things, and we don't allow people to monitor our police and stop our free expression.
Yeah, well, yes, I think that's, you know, I find myself in that difficult position where you end up defending people that you absolutely disagree with, but defending their right to have their say. You know, but that's what it's about, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I am going to lighten the conversation and go to Emma, who has got a story from the Star saying that, and if you live in Carlisle, you want to hear this. Carlisle is the funniest UK spot, apparently. London came second, with Leicester taking third place. Funniest city.
Yeah, so
are we having a laugh?
Apparently people...
What are you trying to say, Angela?
Apparently people in Carlisle laugh 33 times a day. This is a survey to find the UK's funniest city. London comes second, I'm delighted to say, and then is it Leicester in third?
Yeah.
And a quarter of us, 24% of us... Are we ever surveyed in these surveys? I've never been surveyed in any of these surveys, but anyway. A quarter of us found that sarcasm was our favourite type of humour, which I think is a good thing, followed by wit and then observational comedy. But I don't know. I've never been to Carlisle. I don't know that it's that funny.
Oh, it's lovely.
Is it lovely?
Yeah.
Is it funny?
Oh, well, I don't know about funny. It's gorgeous cathedral.
I don't think London's very funny at the moment. London feels pretty depressed at the moment, so I'm not sure.
Then, Alan? You're doing it now.
I like all sorts of things make me laugh. I think that comedy and humour is... I want to keep it light, but is also seen a bit of the free speech
Let's go there, Alan. We've had that today. Right.
Moments. But, look, life is full of the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, as Shakespeare said. They're full of things that are comical, and you've got to laugh a lot every day, I think. It's important.
You have. Actually, it's been proved medically that laughing is good for you.
Very, very good for you.
We should do more of it. Yes, you laugh a lot.
I look so young. I'm 73.
Yes. Shall we look at the Observer, Alan, with you finally? Apparently, are we in an age of indistinguishable opposition parties?
Yes. So this is Anne McElvoy, who is interestingly talking about... what Labour may need to do. She does make a lovely little quote in this saying that blandness is habit-forming, but I'd go one further in saying that, you know, in this obsession, there's a discussion about Stevenage woman with the Labour Party, and then others, Tories, are worried about reform taking the countryside section of voters. But in this discussion, what everyone seems to be missing is, and this is true, I think, as true of Labour as it is of Conservative, is why people feel so politically homeless is because there isn't an addressing of people's needs and interests properly. There's not a commitment to growth and productivity and wealth creation for everyone. There's not a handling a lot of these issues. And she's saying that, you know, like the Tories have taken some of Labour's fire. I think that reflects this kind of technocratic blancmange that we have. And actually what people in Britain want much more is they want to have things that are going to transform things, a vision of beauty and innovation and the future and what we can do now, and have their children have a better life than they've done. We need to get back to some of that kind of approach.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that will happen within my lifetime at some point. Alan, Emma, thank you both very much indeed. It's good to see you this morning.
Thanks. Now, a 13-year-old boy who's been camping out in his back garden for 3 years is finally coming in from the cold today.
Yes, Max Woosey, who you'll know as the boy in the tent, began camping to raise £100 for charity, but 3 years later, he's raised £700,000 and has set a new Guinness World Record.
Well, our South West of England reporter, Jeff Moody, went to meet him.
At the height of the first lockdown, when everyone was going inside, 10-year-old Max Woosey went out into the garden, and he's been there ever since.
It was really strange at first. I think the first 6 months I probably struggled, just knowing that he was out there, and, you know, in that time we had a couple of storms with thunder and lightning, so that was very strange. And now it's just a way of life.
His goal was to raise £100 for the North Devon Hospice, Instead, he's raised £700,000 and counting.
My favourite's been camping out at the rugby stadiums, so Sandy Parks, the Exeter Chiefs Stadium, and Twickenham, so the England Rugby Stadium. But you know what? I think this is going to be it. From tomorrow, I reckon this is going to be my favourite moment.
Yeah.
It's his last night under canvas, and to celebrate, Broomhill Estate near Barnstable has opened its grounds for the mother of all camping festivals. Up to 500 people sharing Max's last night.
I'm so happy with the way the day's turning out. We've got tons of people. It's a hive of activity, music, a hog roast, food trucks, a silent disco in the woods, a party bus with 10 DJs. It's just a lot going on, culminating in fireworks and a good night's sleep for Max and those brave enough to camp out with him.
Brave indeed. It poured down, but Max is used to that.
The night I remember was Storm Beatrice. I had to sleep out because we were a bit worried about the tent blowing away and the storm. We have the house policy is named Storm. I have to sleep out with him. I didn't get a wink of sleep all night because it was so noisy. He snored throughout the night. That's my recollection of snoring in the tent.
He's just upset because I said he snored, so he's making things up now.
After 3 years, Max is calling it a day with a mixture of emotions all round.
I think that's going to be the most natural thing, actually, trying to need to get back into what used to be normal, from being able to sleep inside and do your normal routine again.
Yeah, it's going to be a huge adjustment, because if you think he's 13, so, you know, 3 years is almost a quarter of his life, so that's a big chunk of time that's just been our norm.
Well, Max says he's got lots more adventures planned and lots more money to raise. Jeff Moody, GB News.
I think we're full of admiration for him, aren't we?
Well, good on him. He's, you know, he's done a good thing. He's raised a lot of money. In fact, he's grown up in the tent. I think he's a bit weird. Like, he goes in a little boy, comes out a young man. Very odd, isn't it? Very strange. But good on him. It's something he'll always remember.
Yes.
We're talking about offensive customers in the papers. You know, if a customer offends. If you work behind a bar, if a customer offends you, you could sue your boss, apparently. Ian says, what happened to the customers always being right? That goes out the window then. Yeah, doesn't it just?
Yes. So many of you got in touch with teeth. Margaret says, my friend just had a root canal filling £800. Not really any NHS dentists in Wells, Somerset. Actually, there is a shortage of NHS dentists around the country.
Absolutely everywhere, sadly. Keep your thoughts coming through, gbviews at gbnews.uk. We've got all the top stories heading your way after the weather.
Hello there, very good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Sunday is looking like the better half of the weekend for many of us, and that is partly thanks to high pressure that has built its way in for the day, helping to settle things down for a lot of us. We do just, though, have a little squeeze in the isobars across the far southeast of England, and that's just bringing a bit more of a breeze throughout today. So certainly across parts of East Anglia down into Kent as well. It will feel quite chilly in there, but the cloud is breaking up across central eastern areas of England and into the Scottish borders as well to provide a good number of sunny intervals as we head throughout the afternoon. Cloud just lingering a bit more across southwest England, Wales, up into Northern Ireland and areas of Scotland as well. We can't rule out the odd spot of rain or drizzle here, but it should stay largely dry. Western areas also seeing some of the highest temperatures throughout the day, perhaps 13 degrees across the southern areas, just that bit cooler again where you are on those eastern coastal sites. The cloud in the west will continue to break up as we move throughout this evening, and a lot of us will hold on to some clear intervals throughout the night. That will allow temperatures to drop away, and certainly we could be dropping down to frost levels across many rural areas of England and Wales, even down to -1, -2s in a few towns and cities as well. Just holding up a bit more across the far northwest where we've got a bit more cloud in place, and the breeze will also strengthen here across Northern Ireland, northwest Scotland as we head into Monday. The sunshine hazier across the northwest, but for many other areas it's going to be another day of sparkling sunshine and a really nice start to the new week and the Easter holidays if you are heading out for that. Temperatures around where they should be for the time of year, highs generally around 10 to 13 degrees Celsius. High pressure is looking to stay in charge as we head throughout the new working week, but fronts do want to push their way in, particularly to northwestern areas as we head towards the middle part of the week. So Northern Ireland and Scotland, just watch out for a bit of rain as we head towards Wednesday.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories, controversies and issues.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
It's 5 times the opinion, 5 times the debate, and 5 times the fun. The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You could wink at the end. I can't Britain's
wink,
listening.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Extra sailings have been put on overnight at Dover in an attempt to clear the huge backlog of travellers.
Very good morning to you. It's 9 o'clock. It's Sunday, the 2nd of April. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Angela. These are your top stories.
It's been a night of misery for some travellers as ferry operators in Dover have put on additional overnight sailings as they try and work to clear the backlog of the Easter traffic.
Russia has assumed the presidency of the United Nations Security Council despite outrage from Ukrainians.
And it's the Olivier Awards tonight, the Theatre Awards. Paul Mescal, Judy Cromer and David Tennant are among some of the big names that are up for a top gong.
We'd love to hear from you this morning. So many of you getting in touch. Keep them coming through. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Well, let's start with ferry operators who've laid on additional overnight sailings from the port of Dover as they work through a backlog of Easter traffic.
Strong winds, a large volume of coaches and slower processing times at border control have all been cited as causes. Well, we spoke to travel expert Simon Calder earlier, who described the situation as awful.
But honestly, the stories I'm hearing, the misery of 16, 18-hour waits, quite often in 3 different places. You start off in the cruise terminal, which is across the other side of town from the what we're looking at here, which is the main port of Dover. There's a secondary holding point. And then when you finally get to the entrance to the port, which we're just looking at now, it's about another 4 or 5 hours before you are processed by French border control, because of course the checks take place on this side of the channel, and you're finally allowed to get on that ship. Teachers, drivers doing a fantastic job, but of course we're now going to be in the situation where, well, driver hours are going to become a problem because they've just been up all night. It's a miserable situation, and my heart goes out to them, as I'm sure yours and yours in the studio does too. Awful, awful times.
Well, when he can remember our names. Amongst those weighing in on the Dover chaos is Sir Keir Starmer, who said the government needs to get a grip.
But the Labour leader is also under fire from his own side. Former Blair ally Lord Mandelson has called for him to be bolder in his policies. So let's hear from our very own Camilla Tominey on her thoughts on this and the rest of today's political news. Good morning to you, Camilla. Well, I'm sure you're going to be looking at what Mandelson has said, weighing in there to Keir Starmer. He wants him to be bold and really to make a much stronger impression than he's managed to do already, apparently.
Well, morning, both of you. Yes, we will be weighing into that story. I've got Nigel Nelson, who's been covering these events for 36 years, would you believe, going through the papers, because there's an interesting interview with Keir Starmer in the Sunday Times this morning. And I guess that is Labour's problem right now. I'm also going to be speaking to Lord Falconer, who lived with Tony Blair. How does he think Starmer matches up against Blair? Is the next election going to be a 1992 or 1997 moment? All questions we're going to be asking. I've also got Malcolm Rifkin, the former Foreign Secretary under Thatcher and Major. He can add his pennyworth to the debate. But I think what's interesting about Starmer is, as well as sort of lacking a solid policy platform, we keep on asking of Labour, don't we? Well, what's your actual policy on this? They know what they don't like about the government and what the government's doing. We know what they don't like about the government's management of the migrant crisis, or indeed now this crisis in Dover. But everybody watching, I think, keeps on wanting to ask Keir Starmer, but what's your alternative view? What are you going to do instead to make things better? So I think that's probably the Conservatives' main strength right now, that this lead that Labour Party have got is long, but it's quite shallow, because people don't see Starmer as a Blair figure. They don't think he's got that charisma. I also think, incidentally, I don't know what you two think, that some of these stories about his pension arrangements, his tax return, he does seem to be in the 1% that Angela Rayner keeps on banging on about. And therefore, the electorate look at him, I think, and think, well, you're no different from the other lot. I think they've got to have some clear blue, or should I say red water, between them and the Conservatives for him to really make an impact. Although no doubt the local elections will swing heavily in Labour's favour. And that, of course, could be a pinch point for Rishi Sunak, because if the Conservatives do lose 1,000 council seats, then that's going to destabilise his position after what has, let's face it, been quite a good few weeks for the Prime Minister. We had the Brexit deal, we've had Sturgeon's implosion in Scotland, we've had the AUKUS submarine deal that is signed with countries in the South Pacific. We've got the migrant boat crisis, well, kind of being cracked. We have to wait and see on that. And we've just got this new trade deal that's been again signed in the South Pacific. That does put the Prime Minister in quite a strong position. So I think Keir Starmer's got to do as much work as the Conservatives in order to change hearts and minds come 2024.
Yeah, I wonder, though, if Mandelson's almost barking up the wrong tree a little bit, in the sense that you and I, and I'm sure half the people watching and listening, would like to get more clarity from Labour as to what their policies actually are. But if they start unveiling them, potentially 18 months before a general election, well, if they're any good, the government's just going to nick them.
Well, that's true, but at the same time, Keir Starmer hasn't shown very good politics this week with this announcement about council tax, and I'm going to be putting this to Lord Faulkner when I speak to him shortly. The idea of him announcing that Labour would cut council tax or freeze council tax, well, first of all, the question is, well, why aren't you doing that already in Labour councils where council tax across the country has gone up by 5%? Why is Sadiq Khan putting council tax up by 9.5% in London, if that's his policy? And also, what difference does it make if you're saying that while you're not in government? Surely the important question to ask Keir Starmer is, if you are going to form the next government, then what will you do about council tax? And incidentally, if you're going to freeze it, what services are you going to cut in return? These are all questions I should be asking our guests. The other exciting news that we have with regard to the show today, guys, is that we're going to be speaking to Michael Cohen's lawyer on the Donald Trump story. So Lanny Davis is going to be joining us from America. He's getting up early to do the show, and we'll find out what Michael Cohen's positioning in all this is. As you both know, he is the man that brokered the deal with Stormy Daniels, so that should be quite interesting to follow. All of it coming up at 9:30.
As always, you've got a fantastic lineup on your programme again, Camilla. I'm sure we'll all be tuned in. Thanks very much indeed. Have a good show.
Now, April marks the start of Autism Awareness Month, and with 700,000 people thought to be somewhere on the spectrum in the UK, the National Autistic Society says there is much more to be done to raise awareness and create a more autism-friendly world.
Well as raising awareness to raise money for the charity, a teenager with autism from Chelmsley Wood in Birmingham has decided that he's going to walk 15,000 steps a day.
Well, our West Midlands reporter Jack Carson went to meet him.
In the quiet Birmingham suburbs, one teenager is taking big steps to raise money for autism awareness. 16-year-old Alfie Ford is raising funds for the National Autistic Society throughout April by walking 15,000 steps a day, with all the money from his donation page going to the charity. Alfie, who lives with autism, says he's taking on the challenge to change the perception of the spectrum condition.
I started doing it because I realised there was a lot of misconceptions and a lot of bad things being said about autism, and not many people are truly aware of how people are with autism. A lot of people think that we don't talk, we don't interact with many people, we're not like everyone else, we just have it for attention and everything like that. And I just want to change the way people think of autistic people for good.
Last year, he completed 10,000 steps a day with his mum Marie, before this time deciding to go further by adding an extra 5,000. Marie says she couldn't be prouder of Alfie's hard work.
He's getting a lot more confidence. We're doing a raffle, so he's been emailing people asking for prizes and that. He's received loads of donations, and he just seems like he's happy to do it, considering we can't even get him to go to college because his autism and sensory issues overload. So for him to concentrate on this and do it every day, we're very proud of him.
The National Autistic Society estimates around 700,000 people in the UK have autism, each with their own unique sets of challenges, from social communication to highly focused interests and extreme anxiety. The start of Alfie's month of fundraising also comes at the end of World Autism Acceptance Week, where he's been making his final preparations, including organising a march from Birmingham City's St Andrew's Stadium.
On the 22nd of April, I'll be doing a march from Birmingham Stadium, St Andrew's Stadium to the Edgbaston Stadium, and then to Birmingham New Street train station, and I'll be going to Digbeth, and then I'll be going back to St Andrew's Stadium, where we'll be back by 2:40. We're hoping at half-time something good will be happening, but I can't tell you about that yet. You'll have to wait and see.
With the support of his community and local MP Sakib Bhatti, Alfie's lacing up to start pounding the pavement for a more autistic-friendly world in the future. Jack Carson, GB News, Chelmsley Wood.
And good on him.
We've had a couple of inspirational youngsters today, haven't we? Both of them doing something, raising money for other people.
Yeah, I've got a lot of respect for people like Alfie, actually, and determined to show people what autism is like. It's different. It's different for every person, but to get an idea of what autism is, I think that's really important. Good on him.
Good on
him. Now, I know I very much want a portrait of Angela Rippon.
Hanging in your office?
Hanging in the office. I should have Angela Rippon on one side and Diamond on the other.
Of course.
But it wouldn't cost me £8 million.
No, it wouldn't. No, but...
Mandy but that's what happened with the King,
yes.
I should just point out. There's going to be a portrait of the King, which you can get if you're an institution, a school, police station, whatever. It's going to cost £8 billion. Government's paying for it. Mandy from Nottingham, because I was moaning about it, I like the idea of a portrait, don't like the idea of us spending £8 million. Mandy from Nottingham, hi Mandy, get things in perspective. £6 million plus per day for migrant hotels, but £8 million one-off payment for portraits of our King. It's a no-brainer. Get printing.
I like this, though. Jane, thinking ahead. Jane from Raynham said, could the King's portrait not be used as a screensaver in government offices, etc.? This would be more cost-effective. It wouldn't cost anything.
No.
So it would be totally cost-effective, wouldn't it?
Would
It would be there all the time.
It would be. John, hi, John, says Stephen has joined the Grinch crowd. Oh, come on. I've spent 30 years working overseas in 8 different countries, all far less affluent than the UK, and all had photographs of their leaders and royal families on display. Well, I say, John, I like the idea. I do. It's just, at the minute, what else could we spend £8 million on?
I tell you, in the 2 days that I've been doing this programme, yesterday we had somebody, and he's too modest to have read it out, but I did read it myself, somebody who wrote in and said, we do love Stephen on the programme because we think he's one of the best presenters on television. But today he's the Grinch. You see, you can't win. You can't please all the people all the time.
It's all right. I don't mind being the Grinch, though. I tell you what, John, I'd go down the pub with you, we'd talk it out over a pint. That'd be the way to do it. Any time, my friend.
Pay.
I'd pay. Would I?
Yes, you would.
All right, OK, fair dues. We've got much more to come for you, including Aidan and Stephanie back with all your sport and showbiz.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen. Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories, controversies and issues.
With us four, plus a special guest.
It's 5 times the opinion, 5 times the debate, and 5 times the fun. The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You could wink at the end. I can't Britain's
wink.
listening.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
It is very nearly 9:17. Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Angela.
And it's time for us to take a look at the biggest weekend in showbiz and sporting stories with Stephanie Teskey and Aidan McGee. Morning. Well, I've got to say morning to you both. We've had you both on the programme.
Oh, we have. I tell you what, let's get an update first and foremost, should we, on the F1?
Yeah, it just finished a few minutes ago. Victory for Max Verstappen, but goodness me, what a chaotic finish to because there were 3 red flags. We had to have a restart, and the sport has been accused of putting showbiz before the sport. It should really, Angela, have finished with the podium finishes as they were. So that was Verstappen first, Hamilton second, Carlos Sainz third. That was updated because the last lap was just farcical having seeing the cars come out again and having to go do the last lap under a safety car. It could have just finished as it was, probably about half an hour ago.
They didn't actually race, they just went round?
Pretty much, yeah. It's ceremonial, almost. It's almost like you get at the end of the Tour de France. Yeah. So what it meant was that because Carlos Sainz, who was originally third, was deemed to have caused the crash, he was punished by, or received a 5-point penalty. He landed down in 12th. But you have to say, it's in spite of all that, a decent performance for Lewis Hamilton. Seems much more contented. He's been moaning about his car now for best part of 18 months since he lost out to Verstappen in 2021. So that's decent of him. But, you know, it just doesn't look... It wasn't comfortable the way it finished. It's not good for the sport when that kind of thing happens. I don't think nobody seems satisfied at all.
So what happens after such an event like this? Is there a lot of investigations into why it happened?
Yeah, well, it's actually quite similar to how Hamilton lost his title back in 2021 to Verstappen. But the red flags, I mean, it just makes the race stop-start. And it's an obsession with ending the race under race conditions rather than on a crash. Sometimes, yes, we don't like to see a crash. It's horrible, but sometimes it's better to finish with those. If the top 3 aren't really affected, it's best to just finish at that rather than just getting the cars out to go again.
And no one was injured?
No one was injured that we know of as yet, no. So that's good. I mean, but the safety spec is very high.
Should we have a bit of an awards ceremony? Angela, do you fancy... You must have had a few awards in your time.
A few?
Yeah, I never have. I won't be getting an Olivier.
Oh my gosh, who knows? Maybe one day you might do, Stephen. Yeah. Well, just need to write a theatre play or star in a theatre.
Well, I don't know. He's already been called the Grinch, so I mean, we've already got a production of him to go into.
Oh, thanks a lot.
Apart from the Grinch. Well, tonight is the biggest night in theatre in terms of awards. Olivier Awards will be tonight at the Royal Albert Hall, and it's not going to be a red carpet. It's actually going to be a green carpet made from actual grass. Oh. They're trying to show off their eco-credentials. But it is set to be a big night for first-time nominees because there's over 27 actors and actresses who've been nominated for the first time, including Jodie Comer for her performance in Prima Facie, in which she plays this criminal defence barrister whose view of the legal system changes after she's been sexually assaulted. And we also got Rose Ayling-Ellis, who I'm always impressed with her because she keeps on breaking boundaries, you know, as a deaf actress. So she's up for Best Supporting Actress for her performance in As You Like It. And then we've got Paul Mescal as well, who is in A Streetcar Named Desire. So he's up for Best Actor as well. So it's set to be a really fantastic evening. It will be on ITV from 10 p.m. tonight, and there'll be so many musical performances as well.
Hang on, they're having real grass. That means they're having turf as opposed to a carpet, does it? That's going to stuff those who are walking in.
I know. It affects people's heels, actually. No one likes walking in heels on green grass, so it should be a few fun...
Is it AstroTurf, though, or is it real grass?
No, I don't even know. I just know Well, I missed a joke there, actually, Aidan.
No, it wasn't a joke. No, it's just on a football pitch, on most sporting pitches now, people don't realise that about 30% of the fibre is actually plastic. It's called Deso technology, so it stops the pitches from breaking up. If you remember 20 years ago, you'd see a football pitch any time between October and about March, it would cut up.
Yes.
They're just like carpets now because it's actually plastic that's keeping that together.
Well, that doesn't sound very environmental, though, does it?
Well, yeah, they are trying to boast about their eco-credentials tonight, so it'll be quite interesting to see how people's heels get on in the grass.
It will.
Green carpet.
I'll tell you what, it's been a tragic week for losses. Obviously, we've lost Paul O'Grady.
Yeah.
We've also lost the tartan legend, Aidan.
Ken Buchanan, overnight, 77 years old, hails from Edinburgh, Leith in Edinburgh, arguably Scotland's greatest boxing export. He won a world title at lightweight in 1970 in the searing heat of Puerto Rico, and that's a really good... This is the thing that's distinguished Ken Buchanan. He did his best work away from home, and that's really, really tough for a boxer to do, particularly 40, 50 years ago. And we knew a year ago from his son, Raymond, who said that he was suffering from dementia. He was in a care home. The injuries were largely as a result, we believe, of his participation in the sport, as is quite common these days. We're learning recently, but the tributes are coming from Barry McGuigan. So very sad to hear of the death of the amazing Ken Buchanan. He was an outlier with his unique boxing style, and he was a fabulous man. God bless you, Ken. Josh Taylor, the current world title holder in Scotland as well. Somebody's been compared to Ken Buchanan of late. He said it's a very, very sad day. Everything he did was away from home. There will never be another man like him. I hope the nation can give this guy the send-off he deserves. But a sad loss for boxing there. But yeah, we're going to see more of that, I think, as that generation pass on. It's going to be as a result of the injuries they sustained during the ring, even ones with successful careers.
As it has done with footballers, hasn't it, too?
We're starting to see that now as well, because it's the weight of the ball that was believed to have caused the damage. However, we're even starting to wonder whether the more recent modern balls are even doing damage as well. I think we can see a time in the future where heading could be banned from football. Certainly for players underage.
Really?
Under a certain age.
Yeah. What's happening with Lewis Capaldi?
Well, Lewis Capaldi, in last September, he was diagnosed with Tourette's syndrome, and now he's come out. He has a new documentary which is about to be released, and he's opened up that he may need to quit music because he's seen that the symptoms of Tourette's, which is a neurological
bad
condition,
shaking, isn't it? Tourette's.
Called tics.
Yes.
He's saying it's quite aggravated when he's performing on stage, so he is thinking about, it's his health first, so if he does need to give up music.
And does he have the verbal side of it as well?
Yeah, he does, and he finds when he's performing, people tend to think he's on drugs, and it's actually down to his Tourette's.
It's interesting. It's one of those... I interviewed someone live on television with Tourette's once, which was an experience, and she was a wonderful girl, but it's very difficult to see through it to the person because it is so prominent.
Yeah, and to not have that control, I think, as a performer must be quite scary, especially if you're performing in front of young fans. And he isn't the only singer who's got it. Billie Eilish also has it as well. So, yeah, she's got Tourette's, so it's quite a common thing. But to not have control, especially when you're performing, it's quite scary.
Do you know what I think is interesting? Just thinking about Bruce Willis talking about his Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
You've now got Lewis Capaldi and others talking about another illness that they have. And very often these are illnesses where the individuals involved have been kind of hidden away a bit. We don't hear much about them. We don't necessarily understand them and give them the support that they need. But when somebody like Lewis and the others come out and talk about it, it immediately focuses attention on that, doesn't it?
Does.
And we all get a better understanding as a result.
And I think that's a good thing. You know what? Celebrities are still humans.
Yes.
They're not, shunned away from getting diseases or, illnesses or whatever. So I think it is good that they put it in the public periphery. For it to
and they're prepared to talk about it.
Aidan, you've got exactly 50 seconds to tell us about AJ last night.
Yeah, he didn't look particularly confident. I was worried he would hide behind his jab against Jermaine Franklin, who proved to be a very durable, good-moving opponent.
Better than we expected.
Better than we expected, yeah, exactly. And, to be fair, AJ said afterwards that he was disappointed he didn't get the knockout. Some of his contemporaries, Carl Froch and Dillian Whyte, are saying he doesn't look like the AJ of old. He doesn't look like somebody who's going to win the title. But that being said, he got the job done. He's on a winning path. Where he goes next, I'm not sure. I think he'll struggle against Dillian Whyte on that form. I think he'll certainly struggle against Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder as well. So he's still very much at the crossroads for Anthony, but a win's a win's a win.
Yeah, well, that's true. Can't take that away from him. Aidan, Stephanie, as always, it's a joy. Thank you very much indeed.
But that's where we have to say goodbye for today, because that's it from us. Do stay tuned, though, for the Camilla Tominey Show. And in the meantime, have a great Easter next weekend and have a good week, all of you. Bye-bye.
Good morning and welcome to the Camilla Tominey Show live in Westminster. Lots to come on the show today, as ever. I'm going to be speaking to George Eustace, who is Environment Secretary under Boris Johnson. Going to be asking him about the government's net zero policies. Are they just going to end up making us poorer? And is there a point in the long run? We're also going to be speaking to Labour's peer Charles Faulkner about Tony Blair and whether Starmer shapes up. And I'm going to be discussing foreign policy with former Foreign Secretary Sir Malcolm Rifkind. Don't go anywhere. I'll be back with the papers in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story.